The group of children on their bikes stare intently at the large, abandoned house. Rumors have been circulating all school year about a monster that lives inside. One child tells the others about the kid from a couple towns over who went inside and never came back out, and it's easy to believe that something evil could be lurking inside the rundown home with its peeling paint and many broken windows. The children begin teasing each other, daring one another to go in and see the monster for themselves. No one seems especially eager to volunteer, though, as they all egg each other on. As the group of children joke about who should be forced to go inside, another comes riding up behind them, struggling to catch his breath. "You left me behind again," he complains. Clearly, this is not the first time that this smallest child of the group has been made to try and keep up with his bigger and faster friends. The bigger kids all turn to look at him. They don't need to discuss it any further. The answer to who must go inside has already been decided. The smaller child tries to protest, but ultimately, what decision does he have but to go inside? He can't let everyone else think that he's a chicken. He's got to prove once and for all that he's just as tough as any of them. Without another word, he lets his bike fall into the dirt and makes his way towards the big, creepy house. The door pushes open without any resistance, and the boy looks into the dark house. The boy steps inside, and the floorboards creak loudly under his feet. The inside looks much like the outside, old, worn, and abandoned. But then, he hears something, a scratching noise coming from above him. He turns to leave, but he can see all of his friends through the doorway, and they motion for him to keep going. The boy steels his nerves and turns back. He's going to show them just how brave he is. The boy starts up the stairs, each one groaning as he steps onto it. He reaches the top of the stairs to find a landing with more rooms, each full of dirt and debris. There's spray paint on many of the walls and lots of trash. It looks like teens may use this as a place to hang out. But there at the other side of the landing is one more room, and the door is shut. From outside, the group of children can see through the upper windows as the boy makes his way through the house. They're not laughing and teasing any longer. In fact, they're impressed by how bravely he is exploring the old home. Though none of them would admit it out loud, he's earning their respect. The boy reaches the shut door at the end of the hall and presses his ear to it, but he doesn't hear anything inside. He places his hand on the doorknob and slowly opens it. The boy screams and falls backwards as the cat that was hiding inside panics and jumps through one of the open windows. The boy can't help but laugh. Of course it was just a... The boy screams again as the floor gives way beneath him and he crashes down onto the first floor in a pile of debris. He's stunned by the fall before starting to scream again as that floor gives way too. His yelling is silenced by the air being knocked out of him as he hits the basement floor. He's covered in dust and pieces of 2 floors he fell through. He feels bruised and sore, but he can wiggle his fingers and toes. He's not paralyzed, and it doesn't even feel like he's broken a bone. Maybe he's okay. But no, he's definitely not okay. Because suddenly, there's something picking him up off the floor. As his eyes adjust to the dark basement, he sees what it is that's holding him. It's half man, half machine, a huge, disgusting mix of metal and flesh. The boy is too scared to scream anymore as the creature's unmoving, dead-looking eyes stare straight into his. Its face looks as though the skin has been stretched across a human metallic skull. The boy can only watch as the monster raises its sharp, metallic fingers and brushes the dirt out of the boy's hair. The boy starts to whimper, but whatever this thing is, it doesn't seem to want to hurt him. A tinny, robotic voice coming from a small device on the creature's face suddenly breaks the silence. Al anta ala mayuram. The boy doesn't understand, but the robotic man tilts his horrific head to the side and repeats the same thing. The boy is still confused, but he feels like the robot is trying to tell him something. He somehow gets the sense that it's not going to hurt him. Is this the monster that everyone has been afraid of? A misunderstood machine man living down here in the basement? The robot flinches as something is smashed on the back of his head. He tosses the boy to the side and turns to see the boy's friends, each of them armed with pieces of wood and other scraps as weapons. They've come here to save their friend from the monster that they dared him to find. Another runs up to strike the robot, but before he can reach him, he falls to his knees in pain, as do the rest of the children. The creature has begun emitting a high-frequency noise, and the children try to cover their ears. They all feel a searing pain that makes it feel as though their heads will explode. The piercing noise continues to ring out, but the monster looks like it has entered some kind of dormant state and is no longer moving. The small boy is able to slowly get back to his knees, hands still clasped to the side of his head, and stand up. He runs past the monster and his friends who are writhing on the floor in pain, up the stairs and out of the old house. A woman stands at a kitchen counter. chopping vegetables for their dinner that evening, and talking to her oldest daughter about her plans for that weekend, when the back door suddenly bursts open. Standing there is her son, the small boy. He's barely able to whisper the words, "Monster. There's a monster in the basement," before he collapses, blood pouring from his ears and nose, before he begins convulsing on the floor. At the local police station, an officer is speaking on the phone. "I see. Yes, that is quite strange. A metal man? You don't say. I'll send someone out there right away. Don't go anywhere." The police officer hangs up the phone and looks around, making sure no one is nearby or listening to him, and then takes out his cell phone. He dials a number from memory, and someone answers on the other end almost immediately. "Yes, this is Field Agent Patch," the police officer says. "You need to get a containment team out here right away, and a good one too. I don't know what it is, but it's dangerous." An SCP Foundation mobile task force that specializes in containing dangerous humanoid threats soon arrived at the house and took the anomaly into captivity. Misinformation teams concocted a cover story about a gas leak leading to the unfortunate deaths of several of the town's children and administering amnestics to any potential witnesses. Once the messy business of containment was over, though, it was time to figure out just what this strange creature was. SCP-203 appears to have at one time been a Caucasian human male, though its appearance now is far different than it once was. This bipedal humanoid creature stands 2.5 meters tall and weighs roughly 200 kilograms. Both its incredible height and weight are due to the fact that the man's original skeleton has been entirely removed and replaced with a mechanical framework made of cast iron. The metal skeleton is much larger than the original bones, and in many places SCP-203's skin has split from being stretched over it, revealing the mechanical structure underneath. Other parts of the framework appear to have been intentionally made to protrude through the skin, though it is unclear for what purpose. In addition to this larger-than-normal mechanical skeleton, a number of other augmentations are present on SCP-203. Its fingers have been extended into sharpened, hook-like barbs that are approximately 1 meter long. Its lips have been removed entirely, making it clear that there is no movable jawbone, and that the skull is likely one large hollow piece of metal, and there are several more hook-like protrusions jutting out around the mouth area, smaller but similar in appearance to the fingers. SCP-203's legs have been modified as well, with 2 added joints that give them an appearance more akin to a dog's, and its toes have been removed and replaced with a solid piece of metal similar to those found in steel-toed boots. Its chest has no sternum or breastplate, which causes the skin stretched across to pull inward as its diaphragm contracts. Its ears have also been removed, though it still seems to possess hearing that is far beyond that of an average human. And while its eyes still remain, they are held in a permanently forward-facing position by several needles that emerge from the eye sockets. The irises also appear permanently dilated and do not react to light. In place of a mouth is a small speaker covered by a metal grate that is capable of producing basic vocalizations, though with a distinctly robotic sound to them. Tests have shown that SCP-203 has a basic understanding of English, but its own primary language seems to be a type of Arabic, though there are no records of the exact dialect. SCP-203 does not need to eat or drink, and without any visible mouth, it is likely incapable of either. Instead, it runs off of a power cell located within its body that will provide energy for up to 72 hours. After those 3 days, SCP-203 will shut down and enter a hibernation state for 3 to 4 hours, during which its power source will recharge, providing it with another 72 hours of energy. All attempts to examine SCP-203 by either X-ray, CT, ultrasound, and other forms of diagnostic imagery have failed, and attempts at exploratory surgery have triggered its defense mechanisms, which are both painful and deadly. When it perceives that it is being threatened in some way, SCP-203 is capable of emitting a high-frequency droning sound that has a profoundly damaging effect on the human nervous system. The effects of this defense mechanism were able to be observed directly when a D-Class personnel accidentally struck SCP-203 and its droning sound was activated. Immediately after being exposed to the sound, D-104 experienced a severe headache. After 15 minutes, the headache grew worse, and D-104 began to bleed from the ears. After a half hour, the D-Class, who had now gone to the infirmary, began to experience seizures and was bleeding from all of his orifices. 10 minutes later, the D-Class was dead. Another test was performed, and the results were nearly identical, with symptoms progressing at roughly the same rate. However, this time, rather than move the D-Class to the infirmary, it was kept in the cell with SCP-203. After 40 minutes, the D-Class was dead, and a few minutes later, 203 finally ceased its droning sound. SCP-203 then approached the body of the deceased D-Class and began to use its own augmentations to start removing the skeleton of the D-Class. While SCP-203 was stopped before it could complete its task, it now appears that the droning sound it produces is a defense mechanism, but may also be a part of the process by which it creates new instances of SCP-203. In interviews with SCP-203, it claims to have no memories of its life prior to its augmentation. It says that it now exists in a near-constant state of pain and confusion, and that the times when its battery is expended and it enters a rest state are its only escape from the pain of its existence. It also claims that it has no memory of what happens once its defense mechanism is activated, nor does it remember what it did to the body of the D-Class that was left in its cell. However, it is unknown just how truthful SCP-203 is being. There has been no way to verify anything that SCP-203 tells researchers, and for the time being, its statements are to be regarded by Foundation staff as an attempt to elicit sympathy or otherwise manipulate them emotionally. It's made several requests for pain-killing medication and anesthetics, but so far, all of these requests have been denied. SCP-203 has been classified as Euclid, and it is kept in a specialized storage bunker at a research site. 2 D-Class personnel equipped with sound filtering equipment guard it at all times, and it is accompanied by an armed escort to any testing or research sessions. Is SCP-203 the ultimate victim? A normal human that was transformed against his will into a crude amalgamation of man and machine? Maybe there is something more to SCP-203, or rather, less. Is SCP-203 fooling all of us? Is this tortured iron soul nothing more than a metallic monster disguising itself with the skin of its last victim? Perhaps with more research, we will one day know the answer.
How sure are you that the world around you is real? How concrete is your sense of reality? That the things you see, hear, taste, smell, and touch are actually there and not just figments of your imagination? Or, much more frighteningly, aren't the figments of something else's imagination? Say you have a dream that you're a butterfly in a garden on a scenic summer's day, flying from flower to flower, and then you wake up in your bed the next morning. Can you be certain, as Zen Master Zhuang once asked, if you're a man dreaming you're a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming you're a man? These same questions haunted an SCP Foundation researcher named James Talleyrand for years, before his colleagues found him dead under extremely mysterious circumstances. What follows is a story of how James Talleyrand died, put together as best I could from the scattered files at the highest levels of Foundation classification. Because if what I've found is true, then James Talleyrand found a glitch in reality itself, a terrible, broken thing that throws everything we've ever experienced into question. And the other question we need to answer today is, did James Talleyrand save existence as we know it? Before his reality changed forever, Talleyrand became obsessed with one of the most mysterious anomalies on the SCP Foundation database, SCP-3999, which seemed to have no file and records available to Level 3 researchers. Being an inquisitive enough fellow, he wanted to get to the bottom of this. Given that plenty of anomalies out there had info-hazardous properties, meaning they could mess with people even knowing about them, he decided that this would warrant further investigation. He had no idea back then that all of reality itself hung in the balance. After asking questions around the containment site where he was stationed, he managed to gain clearance to the containment chamber. That's when he got the sense that something was amiss. He found himself at the mouth of a high-security elevator, and after swiping his clearance card, he stepped inside. The elevator began its kilometer-long descent into the earth. Along the sides of the shaft, Talleyrand could see Scranton reality anchors, devices specifically built to negate reality warping anomalous abilities, fixed to the sides at regular intervals. Concerningly, each one seemed to have burnt out or exploded. What on earth was the Foundation hiding down there? That's when he heard strange words, a corruption of the poetry of T.S. Eliot, looping through his mind. Let us go then, you and I, when the 11-day empire eats the sky, like a humanoid melting like clams upon the breakfast table. And so began the end of reality itself. Researcher James Talleyrand blinked, and he was standing in the middle of what seemed to be a Foundation containment chamber. But he wasn't trapped in there with an anomaly. It was just him. and a large group of senior researchers was watching him from outside the glass of a viewing port, seemingly taking notes. It was like he wasn't the researcher anymore. He was the anomaly, trapped here. And then he noticed it. The thing standing behind the senior researchers, though none of them seemed to notice it. A huge, dark figure, standing 2 heads taller than anyone in that room, its face a grinning mess of eyes and teeth. This was SCP-3999, the head researcher on the case of James Talleyrand. Talleyrand tried to plead his case, but no one responded to him. Suddenly, pain shot all through his body, as though his nervous system was replaced by barbed wire. He collapsed to the ground as the other researchers took notes. Suddenly, several television screens appeared all around the room, each facing towards Talleyrand. Each one showed a shaky, first-person video feed that seemed to come from the helmet camera of a different Mobile Task Force member heading into a different building. Talleyrand recognized each one: the salon where his mother worked, the tax accounting office where his father worked, his younger sister's dorm at Penn State University. Talleyrand didn't know what was going on. He wouldn't remain that way for long, though. On each of the screens, the Mobile Task Force breached. In the top left screen, he saw the man whose POV he was following pull out a silenced handgun and murder his mother in front of her screaming coworkers and clients. A similar thing happened in his father's office. The Mobile Task Force agent pulled out a tactical karambit and lunged towards Talleyrand's father, plunging it into the unfortunate man's neck. But worst of all was what happened to his sister. At least in the first 2 killings, there had been no collateral damage, but in the feed of the Penn State video, he saw his sister and her friends freeze in confusion that soon curdled into horror when the barrel of an M249 saw-light machine gun entered the frame. It fired until there was nothing left alive in the video. Talleyrand screamed and banged his fists against the glass viewing port of the chamber until he left red stains against the surface, begging for the slaughter to end. But sadly, it was actually just beginning. SCP-3999 had drawn up a list of every worker at the Foundation that Talleyrand had ever been in contact with. Every friend, every colleague, everyone he'd so much as shared a word with. All of them would have to go next. And under the order of the new administrator of the SCP Foundation, one SCP-3999, all of them would have to be terminated post-haste. It was a massacre all across the site. Many of the targets were arrested and then taken out the back of the facility, forced to their knees, and executed. Cafeteria staff were instructed to put arsenic in the food of anyone on the list. Those who were on field missions had Foundation drones sent after them, blowing up entire city blocks with them inside to kill them if necessary. No demand that SCP-3999 gave could ever be refused. Soon enough, James Talleyrand was teleported out of his cell and into the barren lands outside the containment site. There he was surrounded by huge bonfires, each containing the thousands of charred bones of everyone he'd ever known. His mind almost cracked from the sheer horror of witnessing it, when SCP-3999 appeared next to him and laid an appendage that might be a hand on his shoulder.
This seems like the beginning of a beautiful eternity, Jamesy boy.
It said in a voice that made his ears bleed. Not far from where Talleyrand collapsed, a giant granite statue depicting SCP-3999 had been erected, guarded by a pair of heavily armed Mobile Task Force members. Talleyrand blinked, and a lifetime had passed. He was surrounded by members of the Serpent's Hand in their flowing cloaks, somehow believing that he was not himself, but Brian Frederick Bondisky, a high-ranking Fifthist leader. Perhaps he was always Bondisky. Perhaps Bondisky had just dreamed that there was a man named Researcher James Talleyrand and that unfortunate man's world had ended in the most terrible way. It was almost comforting to believe that, until he felt a presence beside him. He turned and saw that SCP-3999 was standing next to him, doing the closest it could possibly manage to a grin with its monstrous features. He remembered that he was Talleyrand, and this was just another cruel trick. He was the bait, but better the bait than the butt of the joke. In what might have been moments or years later, hard to tell, James was standing in the burning remains of the Wanderer's library. Dead and screaming Serpent's Hand members all around him, blood on his own wounded hands. SCP-3999 just laughing next to him, having a jolly old time. In a flash, Talaran found himself in a Foundation termination chamber, used rarely, but vital when a humanoid anomaly or person of interest is deemed too dangerous to live. SCP-3999 just stood and laughed as a Foundation agent approached Talaran with a handgun, aimed it at the researcher's head, and fired. James Talaran was killed. James Talaran woke up again, alive. The memories of all the horrors that came before are hazy and frightening, like a half-remembered nightmare rendered hazy upon waking. He was sitting at the end of a long table, seemingly being interviewed by another researcher. The researcher asked him who he was. "I'm Researcher Talaran, one of the researchers assigned to SCP-3999. The other researcher seemed confused by this, told him that they had no records of him. The memories of something before were beginning to resurface in the distorted soup that was Talaran's mind. Something happened here. He said, "I told you there's something funny happening to me, but I can't quite describe it. It's like in a dream where things are really disconnected. I have trouble focusing on things now. I just feel a lot of unease. It's like reality has started to feel less real, if that makes sense." The researcher asked him who he was again, that exact same inflection as before, like he was a toy with only 6 fun gaslighting phrases that it would say when you pulled a string on his back. But Talaran wasn't going to just play to this fool's script. He asked the doctor his name, and the man just replied with an odd, choked screeching noise. The room began to melt like old film stock as the monstrous SCP-3999 rose up from behind the doctor interviewing Talaran, devouring the imperfect puppet as reality itself seemed to congeal into a nightmarish, semi-solid soup. James Talaran woke up. He was a baby in his mother's arms. What a terrible dream this whole thing had been. What an awful, impossible dream. He grew up, went to school, made friends, got a job, found a husband, grew old. Never had anything to do with the SCP Foundation, never got assigned to SCP-3999. Years passed. Decades passed. And in his twilight years, he was shot in the head while taking a walk through the park. The shot came from a Remington Model 700 sniper rifle, fired by a Foundation Mobile Task Force member hiding in the bushes nearby. James Talaran woke up. He was a researcher for the SCP Foundation. Except, no, he was Max Lipschutz, a high-ranking Maxwellist leader, standing before members of the Church of the Broken God with a wonderful gift to give them, SCP-3999. Soon enough, Max Lipschutz was standing in the ashes of a Broken God cathedral, the tortured bodies of the mechanists writhing in the muck. 3999 stood above him again, running appendages that might have been fingers through his hair, ruffling it the way you might pet a dog. And the monster had so many eternities of ideas that it still wanted to try out. James Talaran woke up, but he was no longer James Talaran. He was a scented candle in the office of SCP-3999, which was reclining in a huge leather office chair. It snapped one of its appendages, and Talaran's wick set alight, causing a terrible burning sensation like being attacked by thousands of hungry fire ants. This would not end for hours and hours, until the scented candle that was James Talaran was burnt down all the way to the base. He had no idea what scent he was during this period, because he didn't have a nose. When he woke up again, he was in his sister's dorm at Penn State University. SCP-3999 was mercilessly torturing his sister, while a pair of Mobile Task Force agents held his arms in place, so there was nothing he could do to intervene. And after hours upon hours of torture, SCP-3999 took his sister to a nearby Meyer Dairy ice cream store, where the two of them shared a banana split. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, tears racing down her cheeks.
Because it's so much fun.
SCP-3999 said, eating a spoonful of ice cream.
Do I really need any more reason than that?
Talaran woke up in the dark of the SCP-3999 containment chamber. He heard his own voice echoing off the walls, saying, "Let me out! Let me out! This isn't funny, guys. This thing is slowly killing me in here. I'm trapped with it." Was that what was happening here? He didn't even know anymore. He got up and threw his body against the wall of the chamber with all of his might. It fell down like the cheap, painted cardboard backdrops of a middle school play. Beyond, there was just infinite darkness, where the eyes of SCP-3999 watched with voyeuristic glee. There was nothing here. Nothing but him and it. This is when he started to understand what was really going on here. He was trapped in whatever this place was with this thing, and there was no reality outside of it anymore. It was the Alpha and Omega. It controlled the horizontal and the vertical. Perhaps they were looking at a state of reality distortion, or worse, a ZK-class end-of-reality scenario. But no plan was perfect, especially not the plan of a capricious monster intent on absolute sadism above all else. There would be some oversight, some flaw in the design, something he could exploit. Because even if this thing was powerful, that didn't necessarily mean it was smart. He would find its weakness, and when he did, he'd destroy this thing. Buoyed by the desire for revenge for everything he'd been put through, he began tearing at the ground with his fingernails, scratching it up, ripping chunks away. He was able to tear a little hole and saw light glowing up through it. And then, reality folded in on itself like old laundry. James Talleyrand woke up, and the horrors resumed. He was a test subject for head researcher SCP-3999 once again, eager to use his body to test the full extent of pain that a human being can tolerate over however many lifetimes. And the latest experiment it had planned was a real doozy. Members of Mobile Task Force Lambda-14 held the unfortunate researcher down and injected between 40,000 and 50,000 tapeworm eggs into his bladder. While in a terrible state of discomfort from this, he would be forced to spoon-feed cornflakes into the terrible maw of SCP-3999 every night. The creature had officially changed its designation in the halls of the Foundation to Godhead Immortal and Supreme. As part of the containment protocols for the anomaly known as James Talleyrand, he would need to be executed once a month. Of course, this would only leave him dead for a little while each time, and after, he'd be forced to watch his parents being tortured in front of him. Godhead Immortal and Supreme 3999 considered this to be the most wonderful entertainment. Researcher Talleyrand would have a water hose inserted into his body, painfully filling him with water until he achieved a spherical shape. SCP-3999 would set Researcher Talleyrand on fire and toast marshmallows over him as he burns. SCP-3999 would put Researcher James Talleyrand through every form of pain that it could conceive, and its appetite for suffering was completely and utterly boundless. It was willing to hurt anyone, of course, but only insofar as hurting those people could wound and isolate Researcher James Talleyrand. It was somehow intrinsically connected to Talleyrand, and Talleyrand himself began to realize this. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. He was the nexus where all of the creature's drives towards suffering and torment met. He was the ant burning under God's magnifying glass. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. He was at the center of everything that happened to him. And at a point, just torturing one Researcher James Talleyrand wasn't enough. It split him into 48 clones and trapped him in a terrible building made of hundreds of concentric circles, running around like rats in a maze, being tormented forever and ever. They lived, they died, they lived again, they died again. Rinse and repeat. The monster never got bored of hurting him. Somehow, perhaps through sheer force of will and through understanding how the terrible mind of his jailer actually worked, he was able to wrestle control. Not total control, but enough control for him to sit across from the monster on a long, metal table. The researcher interviewing the anomaly, as things should be. He chastised the creature, saying, "Even you cannot survive without order. You latched onto me and still need me. A pathetic excuse for order to exist. This is pathetic. You're pathetic." The monster responded as monsters do, with attempts at intimidation, with threats of violence. But Researcher James Talleyrand, and he truly was Researcher James Talleyrand, was not scared by this monster, merely disgusted by it. He yelled, "You can't frighten me anymore." For the first million years of nonsensical containment procedures and tortures and dream logic, it was the worst pain I'd ever felt. But I survived. For the second million years of nonsensical containment procedures, it was still the hardest thing I had ever done. But I survived. By the third million years, I was growing numb. There's only so many times you can watch anything before you grow numb. But you know what, you freak? I survived. Which is more than you can claim, you dumb brute, because you never lived at all. For the first time in so many lifetimes, the monster was dumbstruck. And sensing for the first time in all of eternity that he had the upper hand, James kept going. So who are you, exactly? Ask yourself that. Who are you before a human who is ready to fight? You're nothing but the primordial ooze. And I am ready to fight. I am numb to your nonsense. Because here's the thing about horror and weirdness. The more you reveal, the less effect it has. I am sick of your horror. I am sick of you. As punishment for this act of rebellion, and what a glorious act it was, SCP-3999 slowly melted researcher James Talleyrand over the course of 5 grueling years. But Talleyrand knew that he'd begun to turn the tide in his favor. If he could end this monster, then reality would return to how it always should have been. He just needed to figure out how. And somehow, he did. Back in the reality that we consider our own, that we have the ontological arrogance to assume is realer than the world where Talleyrand was trapped, something strange happened. The site director of Site 118 came to the realization that one of the newly transferred researchers at the site, one researcher James Talleyrand, hadn't been accounted for in a couple days. After conducting internal investigations, he found that the researcher had taken an interest in SCP-3999, an anomaly that they had no record of ever existing. Until they found an elevator shaft leading a kilometer below the Earth with multiple broken Scranton reality anchors lining its metal surfaces. At the bottom of the shaft, they found the dead body of researcher James Talleyrand, and his phone, where the extensive notes that make up the majority of this account were found. The impossible ordeal that James Talleyrand had gone through. The official file on SCP-3999 concludes with, "It has been determined that researcher Talleyrand was assigned to SCP-3999. SCP-3999 had significant reality warping properties. It breached containment at some point and caused either a CK-class reality restructuring event or a ZK-class end-of-reality event, and it was successfully terminated by researcher Talleyrand at the cost of his own life, reversing said event." Seeing that shadowy figure coming towards him makes the worker turn and run. He hasn't had the time nor the luxury of freezing on the spot, or waiting for it to get closer so he could get a clearer view. He just runs. With every pace, every hurried, horrified step, comes the mental image of the strange figure gaining on him. In his head, every movement he catches in the corner of his eye, every shuffling sound he detects, the thing was right behind him, inches away and ready to strike. So he just keeps on running. Only seconds ago, it was just standing under a streetlight, a ways ahead of the worker, barely moving. He calls out to it, assuming it's a person, somebody maybe lost or in need of help. But then, it steps into the light, and it's not a person at all. The head of the suit isn't on properly. It droops at an angle, like it hasn't been affixed, or is barely hanging on. The crude, lazy-eyed face is haphazardly drooping. That too isn't on right, as the entire head sways unnervingly with each approaching step. Maybe underneath the suit, hiding beneath all that dirty orange fur, still coated in grime despite the rain. Perhaps there's a person in there, whose arm hefts an old baseball bat as they plod closer and closer to the worker. But all he sees is the monster. The filthy costume might be clumsily made, but the worker instantly recognizes the all-too-familiar resemblance of an orange cat from a popular comic strip. It's what starts him running. That, and the blunt weapon the monster is holding, as it menacingly makes its way closer. The downpour doesn't let up as the worker turns a corner, met with the sights of 2 bright, blinding white beams of light cutting through the rain. A car, speeding its way down the road. It catches the worker in its headlights, and he starts frantically waving his arms, encased in the sodden fabric of his jacket. "Help! Oh, please! Please help me!" he yells. "Something's coming after me! I think it's trying to kill me!" The driver doesn't stop, instead simply cruising past. The worker can just about see through the passenger side window, the vehicle's sole occupant giving him a strange look from inside the safety of his car. Almost as quickly as it appears, the car has driven off, its headlights already fading from view thanks to the rain. What the worker doesn't realize is that the driver's look of confusion wasn't directed at him.
but at the thing following him. The creature gives a low, animalistic sound, which causes the worker to spin around. Now he sees it, right up close in all its foul, ginger glory. A tail dangles lazily from the lower portion of the suit, trailing in puddles laden with muck, the water making the fur even dirtier than it already is. It's so close that the awful, pungent stench of the thing hits the worker's nostrils, a sickening smell that somehow seems to fit with the grim, gross costume and its wearer. Seeing the wet, fur-coated suit so close, he realizes that it isn't covered in the soft, plush synthetic coat that he expects a costume like that to be made of. It looks real, like actual cat hair on a huge humanoid shape with the legs and arms of a man. Arms that were midway through swinging a baseball bat right at the worker's head. He ducks just in time, the dull wooden bat glancing off the bricks of a nearby building, narrowly missing the worker's head. As it bounces off the wall, the blunt weapon slips from the soggy gloves of the suit and clatters to the ground. The second he hears the wooden bat land on the ground, the worker turns his heel and runs again, taking advantage of those precious few seconds to get further distance between him and his attacker. It's only exactly as he turns his back that he wishes he'd reached for the bat himself to fight back. Rushing further down the rain-swept street, the worker can hear the heavy slumping footsteps of the suited attacker giving chase. He alternates between looking straight ahead, the raindrops streaming down his face and getting into his eyes, and daring to glance back over his shoulder. Every time he does, he's met again with the horrifying sight of the suit behind him. He wants nothing more than to escape, to get out of this nightmare wherein he is soaked head to toe in rainwater and fear, running for his life from someone dressed as the comic strip cat he sees every day. But as strong as his will to escape is, he can't bear to let the fur-suited pursuer out of his sight for even a second. If he can't see it, then it might be anywhere. At least looking told him that it was still right behind him, bearing down on the worker with its bat now firmly back in hand. The shrill noise of chain links rattling sounds behind him as the attacker in the suit starts striking a nearby fence, making the worker more and more aware that with every strike, it's getting closer. Through the relentless downpour, the worker spots a shape standing on the sidewalk just a few feet ahead. Short, stationary, something he sees every day of his life but never pays any notice to. But tonight, it might just be the thing that saves his life. A trash can. It's full, and that means heavy, and any second now, he'll be close enough to reach it. A plan forms in seconds, erupting like a fire with gasoline thrown on it. If that gasoline was pure, terrified adrenaline of being chased by someone in an orange cat costume. Reaching out, as soon as his fingertips grip the wet metal rim of the can, the worker pulls as hard as possible, his instincts keeping him from stopping running. The trash can clatters behind him as he passes, followed by the heavy thud of the attacker falling to the ground as it trips over the obstacle and lands furry head first in the garbage now strewn over the sidewalk. The worker knows he's only got another short window, another blessing of a precious few seconds to get far enough away from his attacker. He turns, changing course to rush across the street. There's an old warehouse over there. If there are security guards working, they might be able to help. If not, and the place is unguarded, then at least it could be somewhere to hide. A sudden blaring noise pierces the worker's eardrums before he can make it all the way to the opposite sidewalk. It's a horn, coupled with a bright pair of lights appearing as if from nowhere. Then, before he can turn to see it coming, impact. First against the hood of the car, speeding through the rain towards him, unable to stop in enough time. Next, the pain of hitting the jagged blacktop of the road. The second impact, as the worker lands a few feet away, spots of rain still pattering against his face, as everything goes from dark to pitch black for a few seconds. His head floods with scenes from earlier that day, as if his life was about to start flashing before his eyes, only in reverse. The news of the comic strip doing poorly arrives at the Paws Inc. office, and with it, the knowledge that, if there are going to be layoffs, then he'll be first. He's the new hire after all. It didn't matter that the once beloved comic of a cartoon cat is losing its popularity, going stale after so many years in print. It upset the investors, and the worker has been worrying all day if he'd be the one fired to appease them, until he suddenly remembers what's coming after him. Fighting back and clawing his way back to consciousness, he struggles back to his feet, screaming with pain. He's injured, that much he can certainly tell, even if he doesn't know how badly. Hey, mister! The driver calls, stopping his car and starting to climb out of the vehicle. It's a different driver and car this time, and unlike the first, he makes the effort to stop, a mistake that is about to cost him greatly. He sees the worker getting back up, ignoring his calls. He raises his voice to cut through the noise of the pouring rain. Hey, you okay? I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. My lights were on low, wipers are going. It wasn't until you rushed out across the street that... Anyway, look, let me at least get you to a hospital. We can exchange our insurance information once they get you all patched up. The worker wasn't listening. He hears the driver's words but pays him no mind. He's still so intent on getting away that it takes him a second to realize. The car. It's a way out. And then, the worker makes the same mistake as the driver. He stops. And when he does, he sees what has clambered back to its fur-coated feet and is now shuffling towards the driver. "Look out!" the worker yells. The driver turns, just in time to see. "What the hell?" he exclaims. "Wait a minute, why are you dressed in a Garfield costume?" Whack! The sound of the bat being swung at the driver makes the worker feel sick. He turns his back and moves as quickly as he can towards the warehouse, despite the pain and the horrified screams coming from behind. Beneath the rain, there's something else, a twisted, vile squelching noise that quickly snuffs out the driver's dying cries. The worker doesn't dare to look back this time. He doesn't want to see what's happening. Lifting a heavy metal shutter and pulling it shut behind him, he finds himself in the warehouse. It's completely deserted. There isn't a single sign of life anywhere. The only sound is the pattering of rainwater against the hard concrete floor, dripping through a hole in the ceiling. Guided by the low, glowing light of the street lamps outside that bleeds through the warehouse windows, the worker starts fumbling around for a place to hide. Just as he crawls underneath a large pallet rack, he hears a metallic rattling as the fur-suited monstrosity lifts up the shutter. It's inside. With heavy, plodding steps mid-suit, it paces up and down the aisles of discarded shelving. The worker clamps his soaked hands against his mouth, trying to mask his panicked breathing, only to let out a scream as he feels something grab his ankle and pull. With ease, the thing dressed as a disheveled Garfield pulls him out of his hiding place. Instinctively, the worker thrashes his legs, landing a solid kick to the creature. As his foot connects, he notices it doesn't feel like a person underneath the suit. There's no body, no familiar outline of a human being beneath all the soggy fur and stench. It's just a slimy mass. Nonetheless, the kick knocks the garish Garfield back, only a few paces, but better than nothing. He scrabbles to his feet, standing and running as fast as he can in the opposite direction, only to hit a wall at the far side of the warehouse. The shutter is the only way out, and right now it's wide open. But Garfield stands between the worker and freedom. He turns to dart down the next aisle, between the rows of shelves, keeping his eyes on the attacker as he passes underneath the hole in the ceiling. The rain is still coming down through it, leaving a puddle on the floor. The worker's focus is locked on the beast. He suddenly feels his foot slipping out from under him, that awful lurch of his heart as he falls. The puddle. He slipped on it and come crashing down to the ground. The force of the concrete striking his back knocks all the breath from his lungs. Everything is spinning in a nauseating mix of pain, disorientation, and terror. Above, through the unrepaired ceiling, drops of rain come pouring down on him. Then, a low, agonized meow from somewhere nearby. The monster, Garfield, brings its bat swinging down and sharply connecting with the worker lying on the ground. A new surge of pain racks his body, right at the hip where the baseball bat just landed in an unforgiving blow. The worker can do nothing but scream in pain and fear. A horrible sound, like something wet tearing, fills his ears over his own cries. He remembers the sickening feeling of a slimy mass being aggressively pushed into his face. It's disgusting, rancid, but even under all the horror and the repulsive taste, he can detect familiar hints. Pasta, beef, tomato sauce, cheese, all of it moldy and rotten, but still recognizable. The monstrous SCP-3166 forces further fistfuls of lasagna down the worker's throat until the screaming stops. He'd always hated Mondays.
November 19th, 1998. In the bowels of an SCP Foundation containment facility, a low-level Foundation clerk wheels a covered gurney towards a testing lab. He doesn't even know what he's transporting, just that it's something extremely important and somehow related to a dangerous uncontained anomaly. He leaves the gurney in the lab as a pair of scientists give him a silent nod. The clerk has survived this long with Level 2 clearance thanks to his ability to keep his head down. He doesn't intend to compromise his track record by changing that attitude now. The clerk leaves without a word, and the scientists get to work. One of them removes the cover over the gurney to see the highly classified item underneath. A McRib, a famous limited edition McDonald's menu item that somehow turned the lowest quality pork available into a much desired big-ticket item. It's a heavy hitter for the company's seasonal menu, appearing for brief, tantalizing periods before being yanked off the market again to build anticipation for its next appearance. To the untrained eye, there is nothing differentiating this from a regular McRib. It's not even any more caustic to human health than the non-anomalous variant. The biggest difference is that this McRib, rather than the aforementioned low-quality pork, is made out of 89% human flesh. And the most frightening part? This is far from the most bizarre element of this particular anomaly. The scientists already know that what they're dealing with here is a human McRib. That much isn't in question. What they want to find out is who this particular McRib is made out of. It doesn't take them long to discover that it's yet another chilling data point in a terrifying pattern. The burger is made from the flesh of someone who disappeared under violent and mysterious circumstances, just like all the others. In this case, Emma Richards, a 34-year-old woman who disappeared from her home earlier that summer. According to those who knew her, it was as though she'd just up and left one day, offering no reason why. That wasn't like her at all. As they work, the scientists determine the meat in the McRib seems to have been extracted from her belly and thigh. In January of 1999, these same scientists will test another McRib, only to find it perfectly matches the DNA of another person who went missing under extremely mysterious circumstances. Tony Michaels, a man in his 40s, at first thought to have been killed in a drunk driving accident, but his body was never found at the scene. Instead, flesh from his cheek and shoulder somehow made it into the sandwich. In November of that same year, these scientists will also, regrettably, get an answer to the question of what happened to Amy Baker. Her parents had left her at home the previous month, where she'd gone missing in what was believed to be a home invasion and kidnapping scenario. Her parents will never be able to give her a proper burial. The meat in the sandwich appears to have been sourced from eyes and hands. What's going on here? Is this some international conspiracy that goes right to the heart of McDonald's corporate headquarters? Thankfully, no. In fact, it didn't take the Foundation long to realize that all of this madness is centered around one very specific location, the local McDonald's franchise in Martindale, Indiana. And this isn't as simple as some mad cannibalistic serial killer who also happens to be a McDonald's line cook. Nobody knows what process causes the meat to be infused with human flesh. The meat that's delivered to the restaurant is non-anomalous, low-end pork. At some point during the cooking process, this is replaced or transformed into the meat of these missing people, and even the Foundation can't figure out when, how, or why. But it isn't the Foundation that begins this investigation, nor another investigative group of interest like the Global Occult Coalition or even law enforcement. It's a local journalist named Christian Curtis, an investigative reporter for the Indianapolis Star, whose beat involves taking down local businesses with a tendency towards screwing over their customers. Back in 1997, he's working on a groundbreaking piece about local restaurants and grocers skirting food safety regulations. And it's during this little campaign that he first finds out about the McRib. He receives a tip from an anonymous concerned citizen who said of the McRib at the local McDonald's, quote, "Meat is gamey and unnaturally flavorful, feels off somehow. Texture is very unusual, too soft for pork, but with a queer firmness upon biting. Rib sauce is bitter and tastes heavily of iron, maybe spoiled." With a hot tip like that, Curtis can hardly resist getting involved. He visits the McDonald's branch, pretending to be just another customer, and at face value, there doesn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary. The customer seems satisfied and the staff seems clean, professional, and attentive, but that doesn't mean the story isn't worth following through on. After all, one of the things you learn as an investigative reporter is that appearances can be deceiving. Curtis orders a McRib and leaves, taking samples to send to a local food testing lab, who find that the composition of the meat is highly unusual, though they never even begin to expect that they're dealing with human flesh. Before the article can even be published, the suspected health code violation gets the city council and even the local police involved. Before you can say salmonella, the city health inspector has shut down the Martindale McDonald's location until the investigation can be properly conducted. It seems almost like this is a situation that takes care of itself without the SCP Foundation even getting involved. An anomalous McDonald's location is serving human flesh, and the health inspector shuts it down. But sadly, this isn't the end of the matter. It's just the beginning. On October 29, 1997, 4 days after the city closes the McDonald's, something extremely strange starts to happen. Local police are called in after a large and seemingly rowdy crowd gathers outside the closed Martindale McDonald's location, angry and confused about the closure of their favorite restaurant in town, especially during McRib season. When some local cops are dispatched to contain the incident, They almost find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the McRib-loving citizens. The official police report on the matter reads, "The crowd was unhappy and unsatisfied with any reason given as to why the McDonald's had been closed. Several individuals approached the perimeter to ask when it would be reopened and, when told there was no definite date, became agitated and requested permission to cross the perimeter to make a sandwich for themselves. These individuals were persistent, unwilling to take no for an answer, and on several occasions had to be pulled back away from the building where they had crossed the line. This continued for several hours until sheriff's deputies arrived to help disperse the crowd. It would seem almost too far-fetched to be true if it wasn't for multiple reliable eyewitness reports to corroborate the details. Another one of the officers in attendance, Mr. Sam Hill, added this to the official record. They were insatiable. I kept trying to tell them that they couldn't go in, that the meat was spoiled, and that there were health concerns involved, but it was like they couldn't hear what I was saying. They didn't even look at me. They just stared straight past us and towards the building. One woman I had to restrain and pull back out, and the entire time she kept repeating, "I just need a taste. Give me a taste. I just want a taste." Same thing with Officer Derry when he got there from county. It was like they were transfixed. No amount of explaining what was happening made a difference with them. Thankfully, the first responders are able to get the crowd to reluctantly disperse without resorting to more severe crowd control measures, but there's a strange sense of foreboding in the air, the feeling that nothing was solved here, and that the can has just been kicked further down the road for some awful yet inevitable outcome still to come. Not a word is exchanged on the matter, but everyone there knows it. And that's why a detail of 10 officers is placed around the McDonald's that night, hoping to head off the fears that the same group of embittered locals might return and break in. The leader of the group, Officer Jeff Moore, already somehow has this creeping sense that 10 won't be enough to hold off whatever's coming, but he doesn't want to look weak in the line of duty. This will cost him and all the others dearly. The Martindale, Indiana McDonald's is on the edge of town, bordered on 3 sides by a relatively dense thicket of trees. A single road leads towards the McDonald's itself. It's the kind of place you might see in the dead of night while driving from one town to another, the faint glow of the golden arches peeking out above the tree line. The kind of place that makes you think, wow, they'll put a McDonald's anywhere, huh? As the hours creep on, night starts to fall. 7 of the officers stand outside, armed with little more than the pistols holstered at their hips. On the inside, Officer Moore and 2 others wait, forming a kind of rudimentary command center. Perhaps it's the boredom and the growing dark causing their eyes to play tricks on them, but Moore and the others can swear that he sees people moving amongst the trees. Or at least, he's pretty sure those are people. It's hard to make out other than some shadowy figures that dart from trunk to trunk. Only a couple at first, but then more and more and more. What could they be planning out there? He tries his best to keep observing without losing his nerve. But as the figures in the woods seem to multiply, that's getting harder and harder to achieve. And when Moore and the others hear a loud, wet thud against the side of the building, their hearts nearly leap out of their throats in shock. But they're on the clock, and that means they have to investigate no matter how scared they are. As Moore investigates, the sense of unease grows. Something's wrong. He knows he should act on his growing suspicions and start calling it all into the station. He starts to radio in, but before he can say anything, he's interrupted by the sounds of panicked shouting from the officers on the other side of the McDonald's. And soon, that shouting is underscored by a smattering of gunfire and screams. Moore draws his own handgun and tries to stop his hands from shaking as he runs back through the restaurant to look out the window and see what the hell is going on here. And what he sees out of that window is something straight out of a nightmare. It's the customers. The same people who had been crowding outside the store earlier, demanding to be let in, demanding their precious McRibs on pain of an uprising. They're running out of the tree line, yelling and snarling. But it's not just that. They're different. Moore thinks they must all be wearing hats at first, elaborate headdresses with large, ceremonial antlers, like the kind you see on a stag. But no, that's not it. That's not it at all. Those antlers are growing right out of their skulls, just like the jagged rows of fangs in their jaws and the long, serrated claws where their fingernails should be. They shrug off the gunshots being unleashed against them as they set upon the assembled guards, biting, clawing, chewing. Moore has never been so afraid in his life as he watches his fellow officers fall to the hungry tide, crashing against them. Should he shoot? Should he run? Would either option help him anymore? Moore tries to gibber a plea for help into the phone, incoherently babbling about how he and his men are being attacked and killed. As the front doors smash open and the customers lunge for him, all that Moore can choke out into the phone is, "They're not people!" After the monstrous Martindale McDonald's massacre, the SCP Foundation enters our story at long last. It isn't every day that something emerges from the woods and effortlessly slaughters 10 cops. Foundation field agents embedded in regional law enforcement quickly nip any further police involvement in the bud and pass the assignment up the chain. Within the hour, a Foundation cleanup crew led by Agent John Freeman arrives on the scene, hoping to get everything under control and potentially treat and debrief survivors. But not only are there no survivors, there are barely even any bodies, mainly just skeletons, loosely draped with the police uniforms they wore in life, eaten all the way down to the bone by their ravenous assailants. Even the cleanup crew, who, as you can probably imagine, have seen some truly horrifying things on the job, can't hide their disgust at what they're seeing here. The only other evidence, in addition to the bodies, are the words, "Reopen tomorrow," scrawled across the nearby sidewalk in blood. It's a devotion to the McDonald's cause that not even Ronald himself could be expected to muster. Before undergoing voluntary amnestic treatment to scrub some of the more unpleasant edges of this particular memory out of his mind, Agent Freeman gave a detailed and extremely unsettling statement on what he'd witnessed that fateful night. What was immediately apparent was the power dynamic between the attackers and their targets. The officers killed were not men with guns. They were prey animals at the mercy of a carnivorous host. There was no law of engagement between the two. Most were rendered unrecognizable, aside from that which could not be consumed. Badges and weapons were left untouched, but the soft meat of the body was picked apart like carrion. Throughout the entire night, we were being watched. They had already had their fill, but the most impassioned among them still demanded our attention. They stayed at the tree line, just far enough away that we couldn't see their gnarled and broken faces, but could still make out the long and twisting antlers extending out of their scalps in the moonlight. They wanted us to know that they knew. But then it's no different than when any access to food is removed from a group that depends on it. Remove a population of deer, and the wolves begin to starve, and then their behavior changes. They've certainly been here far longer than we have. It's not unexpected that they would have found a way to simplify the process of gathering food the same way we have. How are their actions any different than our own? Reducing animals to neatly packaged meat discs to be sold to the public for just a single $1 or less. Only real distinction here is that we're the meat. One of them was standing in the shadows near my car when I went to leave. It was an enormous thing, stretched unnaturally thin and wretched, shuddering and shaking like each breath was the death rattle of every living being around it. Flesh changers aren't something I'm unfamiliar with, and this wasn't the first time I'd seen their work, but never had I been so close to one. I asked it what it wanted from us, why they had killed those men, though we both knew that I understood it perfectly clear. And in that moment, I had never been so small in my entire life. Despite all my experiences, a life lived fully and whatever else I had to offer still ahead of me, in that moment, I was a convenient tube of packaged meat, neatly tucked away until such time as it was needed. When it answered, its voice was like dry wind over an empty field. It said 6 words before it melted back into the dark.
Reopen tomorrow. Don't change the menu.
And that's the kind of offer that not even the SCP Foundation could refuse. They had an ultimatum before them, a cost-benefit analysis, if you will. Much like the Martindale police officers, they could try to keep the McDonald's closed, even if it meant fighting off the horrific customers to keep them at bay and potentially losing huge numbers of personnel as a result. Or worse, risk the customers looking for their fix elsewhere and causing massacres all over the state of Indiana. Or they could instead engage in controlled sacrifices. People only disappeared during McRib season, after all, and those disappearances were always esoteric enough that they could be easily written off as having non-anomalous causes. They could monitor the McDonald's and let it have its pound of flesh, metaphorically and literally speaking, without it going any further. Can you guess what they did? Due to the complex nature of SCP-6745, it's one of the rare anomalies that has both a primary and secondary containment class. The primary class being esoteric, meaning that it doesn't comfortably exist within the framework of Safe, Euclid, and Keter classes. It also has Thaumiel as its secondary class, a rare containment class reserved for anomalies that contain other anomalies. And in this case, I suppose that fits. Given the role that the McDonald's plays in satiating its violent and terrifying anomalous customer base. Being one of the more recently classified anomalies on the database, its file also has risk and disruption classes. The risk in this case is danger, meaning that the physical risk it represents is significant to extreme, which any of its victims easily could have told you if they hadn't been somehow killed and transformed into sandwiches. Its disruption class is Kennic, meaning that its radius of potential normality disruption is as wide as at least an average city and could spread frighteningly quickly. SCP-6745 is another one of those anomalies where the containment methods, while effective, likely won't leave you with a feeling of comfort. For all the reasons previously discussed, the Foundation deemed closing the restaurant to be a far greater risk to normalcy than keeping it open, given the extreme violence the customers are liable to commit if their appetites aren't satisfied in a controlled manner. Foundation agents work undercover as members of the local community and law enforcement to minimize any potential breaches of containment protocols within the McDonald's building itself. During the season when the McRib is on the menu, these embedded agents are to report any unusual civilian behavior to Site 81 for recording and archival purposes. Knowledge of what goes on within SCP-6745 must be kept under wraps at all costs, including within the Foundation itself, where full knowledge of the file is restricted to Level 4 personnel and above. Anyone seen expressing a desire to tell others about SCP-6745 must be detained and treated with powerful Class C amnestics. After all, if news of the goings-on here ever go public, the Foundation certainly won't be loving it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take a break from my Foundation duties to grab some lunch. All this research has left me craving a McRib.
The retirement facility was always lively in the mornings. Breakfast was served promptly at 7, and the dining room would fill with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of utensils, and the occasional burst of laughter. At the heart of it all was the old man, a favorite among the residents and staff alike. He had a routine that everyone admired. Each morning, without fail, he would pluck a flower from the facility's garden, a single daisy or rose depending on the season, and bring it to a widow who sat quietly by the window. She rarely spoke, her dementia clouding most of her days, but her face would light up when he gently placed the flower in her hand.
Another beautiful bloom for a beautiful lady,
he'd say with a wink, his voice warm. The widow would smile, sometimes with tears in her eyes, as though a fleeting memory of something lost had returned. The old man's presence was like that, lifting the spirits of everyone around him. When the widow sat alone at her table that morning, the absence of a flower was immediately noticed.
Strange, one nurse muttered as she refilled coffee cups. He's never missed a day.
The widow stared at the empty spot on her table where the flower would usually sit. For a moment, her hands trembled, as if grasping at something intangible. Her expression was sharper than usual, her lips moving soundlessly.
He's probably just running late,
another staff member reassured, though a note of unease lingered in their voice. The minutes stretched. Breakfast came and went, but there was no sign of the old man. By mid-morning, concern turned to action. One of the nurses decided to check his room. She knocked twice before opening the door, her cheerful greeting faltering in her throat as she stepped inside. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow. The old man sat in his chair by the window, his back turned to her. He was trembling, a faint, jerky motion that seemed to ripple unnaturally through his shoulders.
"Are you all right?"
she asked, stepping closer. He didn't respond. She hesitated when she saw the floor beneath his chair. It was wet, not with water, but with something viscous and red. Her breath hitched as she moved around to face him. His mouth was open, the corners stretched unnaturally wide. Where his teeth should have been, there was only raw, glistening muscle, pulsating faintly as though it were alive. His once warm, tan skin
had taken on a deep crimson hue, almost glowing in the dim light.
"Call an ambulance!"
she shouted, her voice cracking as she backed away. As she fumbled for her radio, the old man suddenly rose, his movements unnatural and erratic. His arms jerked like a marionette's, his head tilting sharply to one side, as though something unseen was pulling him.
"Sir, please sit down,"
she pleaded, though fear made her voice quaver. He didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he staggered toward the window, his fingers pressing against the glass with surprising force. The nurse reached out instinctively, her hand brushing his arm. His skin was hot, almost feverish, and she recoiled. Before she could react, he hurled himself against the window. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. Again, he slammed into it, the jerking motions of his body now frantic.
"Help!"
the nurse screamed, but her voice barely carried over the chaos of the moment. The window gave way on the third strike, shards of glass exploding outward as the old man tumbled through. He hit the garden below with a sickening, wet thud, his body twisting grotesquely upon impact. Staff swarmed the garden, but it was too late. The old man's body lay motionless, his crimson skin stark against the green grass. The facility manager called the authorities, speaking in hushed, clipped tones as the staff tried to usher the other residents away from the scene. Whispers spread among the nurses and aides, their concern quickly turning to fear.
"What happened to him?"
one whispered. Another shook her head, her expression grim.
"It's not just him. There was something wrong. Something inhuman."
That evening, the nurse who had found him finished her shift in a daze. The image of his crimson skin and jerking movements replayed in her mind over and over, haunting her even as she walked through her front door. The single mother of 3 greeted her children. She forced a smile, hugging them tightly, and moved through the motions of normalcy, preparing dinner, overseeing homework, and tucking them into bed. Yet even as she tucked the youngest beneath his quilt and kissed his forehead, her thoughts lingered on the old man's contorted body and the way his skin seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the dim light. By the time the house fell silent, her exhaustion caught up to her. Heading to the bathroom for a moment of quiet, she reached for her toothbrush, hoping the routine would steady her nerves. But as she brushed, something felt off. Her mouth ached, a dull throb growing sharper with each stroke. Pulling the toothbrush from her mouth, she noticed streaks of blood coated the bristles. She leaned closer to the mirror, her brow furrowing as she examined her teeth. At first, they looked intact, but something wasn't right. The edges of her teeth seemed softer, almost pliable. She pressed a fingertip to one and felt it give, like raw muscle. A sharp pain lanced through her jaw, and she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her reflection stared back at her, her lips trembling, her breath shallow. When she opened her mouth to scream, no sound came out. A wave of panic washed over her. Just then, her youngest child wandered into the bathroom, tugging at her robe.
"Mommy, my mouth hurts,"
he whined, his small voice filled with discomfort. Her fear deepened, but she managed to force her expression into something resembling calm. She crouched down, pressing trembling hands against his cheeks as she examined his mouth.
"Let's get you back to bed,"
she murmured, her words muffled and garbled, the distortion from her altered mouth making her speech almost unrecognizable. He stared at her, confusion etched on his brow, but allowed her to lead him back to his room. She tucked him in, smoothing his hair as she whispered a promise to take him to the dentist the next day, for both of them. Back in her own bed, the nurse's skin began to feel unnaturally warm. Her joints stiffened, resisting even the smallest movements. A sharp pain radiated through her jaw, spreading downward in waves. She whispered into the suffocating darkness, her breath ragged.
"What's happening to me?"
As the question lingered in the air, her bedroom door creaked open. Her second eldest, a little girl, burst into the room, her voice high-pitched with fear.
"Mommy, something's wrong with my teeth."
The nurse sat up, her movements sluggish and jerky, as though her body was fighting her every command. Her daughter stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear, her small frame trembling.
"Come here,"
the nurse said, or tried to. The words came out warped, barely audible through her transforming mouth. The little girl hesitated, her wide eyes flickering to her mother's face.
"Mommy, you look weird."
Panic surged through the nurse. She reached out a hand, but her arm spasmed uncontrollably.
"It's okay, sweetheart,"
she managed to croak, though even she didn't believe it. The girl shuffled forward, reluctant but seeking comfort. When she climbed onto the bed, the nurse gently cupped her chin, tilting her face upward. The sight sent ice through her veins. Her daughter's gums were swollen, the once white teeth beneath visibly softening, taking on a reddish hue. The girl whimpered as the nurse pressed a trembling thumb to her molars, which gave way with an unnatural pliability.
"It hurts,"
the child whispered, her voice trembling. The nurse swallowed hard, forcing down the rising tide of despair.
We'll get help,"
she said, her words slurred and thick. The girl nodded, her trust unwavering despite her fear. The nurse hugged her close, stroking her hair as tears streamed down her face, mixing with the beads of sweat forming on her now reddening skin. A sudden crash from the hallway jolted her. She stiffened, her breath catching as she strained to listen. Another crash followed, louder this time, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet.
"Stay here,"
she rasped, guiding her daughter under the covers.
"Don't move, no matter what you hear."
The girl clutched her bear tightly, her wide eyes brimming with tears, but she nodded. The nurse stood, her legs stiff and reluctant to obey. Each step toward the door was a battle against her own body, her muscles jerking unnaturally. In the hallway, the shadows seemed darker, the air heavier. Her youngest son's voice echoed faintly from his room.
"Mommy?"
he called out, his tone tinged with confusion and fear. Her heart pounded as she turned toward his door, her trembling hand reaching for the knob.
"Mommy, my mouth!"
His words were cut off by a sharp, wet sound, followed by silence. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, the door creaked open, and her son stepped into the hallway. He was crimson. His small body jerked and twitched, his head tilting unnaturally as he stared at her with unseeing eyes. Her knees buckled as she stumbled backward, the reality of what she was witnessing crashing down on her.
"No,"
she whispered, her voice breaking. The boy took another step forward, his movements stiff and mechanical. Behind him, more shuffling sounds emerged from the darkness of his room. The nurse staggered back into her bedroom, slamming the door shut and pressing her body against it. Her daughter's frightened sobs came from under the covers, muffled but heart-wrenching. She slid to the floor, her body convulsing as the changes overtook her entirely. Her skin burned as it turned a vivid crimson, and her jaw locked in place, silencing the scream that built in her chest. By the time the first rays of dawn seeped through the blinds, the house was silent. The next morning, the retirement facility was unusually quiet. The usual routine, the clatter of breakfast trays, the shuffle of walkers, and the hum of soft conversation, was muted. The events of the previous day hung heavy in the air, the old man's absence now an unspoken weight shared by all. Staff moved cautiously, avoiding eye contact with one another. The widow, usually seated by the window with her flower, was not there.
"I'll check her room,"
a nurse whispered to another, nodding toward the window.
"Do it quickly,"
came the reply.
"Something about today feels wrong."
The nurse turned and headed for the hallway, but she didn't make it far. Halfway to the widow's room, she froze. The faint sound of something scraping against a hard surface caught her attention. It was rhythmic and deliberate, like nails dragged softly across tiles.
"Hello?"
she called out, her voice faltering as she turned the corner. The hallway stretched out, lined with rooms. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then she noticed the door to the old man's room. It was ajar, though it had been locked the day before. She stepped closer, her pulse quickening. The scraping sound grew louder, interspersed with faint, jerky thuds. Pushing the door open, she gasped. The widow stood in the center of the room. Her skin, once pale and papery, had flushed a deep crimson. Her fingers twitched erratically, clawing at the desk as if searching for something unseen. The last flower she received was clutched tightly in her hand, its petals crushed and bleeding red sap onto the floor.
Ma'am, are you all right?
The nurse asked, taking a cautious step forward. The widow turned slowly, her movements unnatural. Her lips parted, revealing a horrifying sight. Her teeth had completely dissolved, replaced by pulsating red muscle. The nurse recoiled as the widow took a staggering step toward her, her arms jerking as though yanked by invisible strings. The nurse fled, shouting for help. Staff members rushed to the scene, but chaos quickly followed. The widow's jerky movements grew frantic as more residents emerged from their rooms, some drawn by the noise, others displaying the same crimson transformation. In minutes, the place was in total chaos. Nurses and aides rushed from room to room, trying to hold back the residents, but it was no use. They were overwhelmed by the residents' unnatural strength. One orderly was thrown against the wall with a sickening crunch, his arm hanging limp as the crimson-skinned residents turned their attention elsewhere.
Lock the doors!
Someone shouted.
Get everyone who's normal to safety!
The unaffected residents at the retirement facility huddled together in the dining room, their wide eyes filled with terror as the staff attempted to secure the building. Outside, the transformed individuals were relentless. They pounded on the locked doors, their fists leaving smears of blood and saliva on the glass. The noise echoed through the halls, a grotesque symphony of desperation and fury. But far from the chaos at the facility, in the quiet of her small home, the nurse who had discovered the old man's body the previous day was facing her own nightmare. She stood in the bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink, her knuckles white as she stared into the cracked mirror. Her gums throbbed with a dull, relentless ache, and her teeth, once sturdy and familiar, now felt foreign, soft and malleable under her tongue. She bit down lightly, only to feel her teeth compress like overripe fruit. Panic surged as she opened her mouth, leaning in closer to the mirror. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat, but no sound emerged. Her jaw convulsed violently, her head snapping back involuntarily as an unnatural grinding noise filled her ears. It was mechanical and rhythmic, like machinery roaring to life deep within her skull. From the living room, her children's voices called faintly, their words blending into the cacophony in her head. She stumbled out of the bathroom, her movements erratic and jerky, as if her body no longer fully obeyed her. When she entered the living room, she froze. Her youngest son was clutching his face, tears streaming down his cheeks.
Mommy?
He whimpered, his voice muffled. His gums were swollen, his teeth visibly softening into the unmistakable texture of muscle. Her eldest daughter was crouched in the corner, her skin already a vivid crimson. She rocked back and forth, clutching her knees as her jaw trembled uncontrollably, her head jerking at unnatural angles. The middle child stood stiffly, his arms twitching as his movements became increasingly puppet-like. The nurse's own body spasmed violently, her muscles locking and releasing in unpredictable patterns. She tried to speak, to call out to her children, but all that escaped was a strangled, guttural sound. Her youngest reached out to her, his small, crimson-stained fingers trembling. Her daughter turned sharply, her body twisting unnaturally as she moved toward the door. One by one, the children began to shuffle forward, their jerky steps mirroring the nurse's own. As though responding to an unseen signal, the family moved as one, staggering out the front door into the cool air. The street beyond was eerily silent, but not empty. Other figures emerged from nearby houses, their movements identical, stiff, erratic, and eerily synchronized. Men, women, and children of all ages moved in the same disjointed, puppet-like manner, their crimson skin glowing faintly under the morning sun. They were all infected with the anomaly that would come to be known as SCP-6093. The infected people, known as SCP-6093-1, moved with purpose, their jerky steps propelling them toward the outskirts of town. They seemed drawn to the same destination, as if pulled by an invisible force. They converged on the open highway, joining others who had also succumbed to the transformation. Together, they marched toward the horizon, a silent, grotesque procession that grew larger with every mile. By the time the crowd reached the Chihuahuan Desert, It numbered in the thousands. They moved as one, their bodies trembling with the same eerie rhythm. Then, the first clusters began to form. Men, women, and children, all pressed together in grotesque harmony. Their crimson skin glistened under the scorching sun as their bodies contorted, merging with those around them. By nightfall, the first of the monoliths had emerged. Rectangular and pulsing with a life of its own, the structure, designated SCP-6093-2, stood as a grim testament to the anomaly's reach. Similar structures began to appear in the Thar Desert of India and the Kalahari Desert of Botswana, each one larger and more imposing than the last. The hum of these monoliths was low and resonant, sending ripples through the air and ground. As Foundation reconnaissance teams approached, the structures began to emit a series of sounds, distorted, rhythmic, and almost childlike. Analysts quickly identified the noises as a crude form of communication. Translated by the Department of Extra-Dimensional Linguistics, the message was simple yet chilling. "Mommy, my mouth hurts." In the Foundation's global command centers, the weight of the situation was becoming unbearable. The monoliths weren't merely stationary anomalies. They seemed to possess intent.
They're not just forming structures,
A senior researcher muttered during an emergency briefing.
they're sending a message. It's asking for help.
The room fell silent, the implications heavy. The afflicted weren't just victims of an anomaly. They were part of something far larger, something alive.
What do we do with that?
An agent asked bitterly.
Offer them therapy?
The reply from the director was grim.
We burn them.
He stated firmly. Task forces were deployed to the deserts with strict orders: contain and destroy. Flame units were prepared to reduce the monoliths to ash, regardless of the strange pleading sounds they emitted. The first monolith in the Chihuahuan Desert collapsed under the intense heat of industrial incinerators. The pulsating, flesh-like material burned quickly, releasing an acrid smoke that filled the air, thick and suffocating.
God, that smell.
One observer muttered, pulling his scarf tighter over his face. Another, clutching a handheld scanner, watched intently as the structure writhed in its final moments.
It's reacting to the heat like it's alive.
She murmured, her voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. As the flames licked higher, the surrounding SCP-6093-1 instances began to convulse violently. Their crimson bodies spasmed as though struck by an invisible force, collapsing one by one into the sand.
Are they dying?
Someone asked, a younger agent whose trembling voice betrayed their unease.
No,
The lead scientist replied grimly, watching as one SCP-6093-1 instance twitched its head unnaturally before crumpling.
they're connected. The monolith is their core. Take it down, and they go with it.
Another figure stepped forward, a grizzled operative whose gaze never left the burning monolith.
If that's true, then why does it feel like we're being watched?
Silence fell over the group as they turned their eyes to the remaining SCP-6093-1 instances, still standing at the far edges of the field. Though they had not yet collapsed, their heads jerked toward the observers in unison, their hollow gazes fixed and unnerving.
Keep burning.
The lead scientist said sharply, breaking the stillness.
We can't let up now. Finish it.
In the Thar and Kalahari deserts, similar operations were underway. The monoliths resisted, their undulating forms pulsating with renewed vigor, as if fighting back against their destruction. But the Foundation's firepower proved overwhelming, and the grotesque structures were eventually reduced to smoldering ruins. The air was heavy with ash and the stench of charred flesh, but the threat of SCP-6093-2 had been temporarily neutralized. Despite the successful destruction of the monoliths, the anomaly persisted. New cases of SCP-6093 appeared daily, far exceeding the Foundation's capacity to respond. The condition's method of transmission remained a mystery. Neither direct contact nor environmental factors seemed to account for its rapid spread. Cities worldwide saw outbreaks that defied containment. Entire neighborhoods transformed overnight as afflicted individuals gathered in silent processions, drawn to unknown destinations. The Crimson Tide grew unstoppable. Amidst the chaos,
The Foundation initially declared Biological Containment Area 07 as a facility to transfer all discovered instances of SCP-6093. But it quickly became a grim symbol of the anomaly's escalation. Officially tasked with housing and studying SCP-6093-1 instances, the site reported a breach during an experimental attempt to deconstruct one of the afflicted. Within hours, personnel began exhibiting symptoms. Their teeth dissolved into muscle tissue, and their skin flushed crimson as they succumbed to the transformation. The infected staff gathered in the site's central courtyard, their bodies pressing together in a sickening, synchronized dance. By dawn, a new monolith stood where the containment site had once been, its pulsations visible from miles away. The Foundation officially declared Biological Containment Area 07 lost, and SCP-6093 became designated as a SCOTOS containment class. The monoliths continued to emerge, their pulsating hum disrupted seismic equipment and communications, their resonance spreading further each day. The monolith's intent remained a mystery, but the Foundation knew one truth: they were losing. In the final days of the year, the anomaly's impact was undeniable. The anomaly had spread to every continent, with quarantine zones failing as quickly as they were established. In one remote village, a young boy watched from his window as his mother joined the crimson-skinned masses marching down the dirt road. His tiny hand pressed against the glass, and his voice trembled.
"Mama, don't go,"
he whispered, but the figures marched on. Hospitals worldwide reported a sharp rise in admissions for mouth-related issues, the early signs of infection becoming horrifyingly routine. The Foundation scrambled to intercept cases before they progressed, deploying advanced AIC systems to monitor symptoms. Individuals identified as infected were transported covertly to Foundation hospitals, where infected tissue and bone were surgically removed, incinerated, and the patients sent back into society with fabricated stories of oral cancer. But as the number of cases rose, it became clear that containment was no longer sufficient. The revised special containment procedures reflected the desperation of the Foundation's efforts. All individuals who had undergone surgery for SCP-6093 infection are to be located and terminated, their remains incinerated. Foundation personnel are required to undergo daily oral examinations. Those infected are to be immediately euthanized, their bodies destroyed to prevent further spread. Every instance of SCP-6093-1 is to be incinerated upon discovery, whether contained or uncontained. Above all, the formation of SCP-6093-2 monoliths is to be avoided at all costs. In the wake of Incident 6093-034, the Foundation confirmed the number of SCP-6093 cases has surged to over 2.5 million. Current projections paint an even grimmer picture: over 10 million cases by the start of next year. The anomaly is not slowing, it's accelerating.
You're staring into the grinning face of the inhuman flight attendant, her eyes too large and far apart, her teeth too sharp and too numerous, her skin shiny and wet, fish-like. She holds the glistening chrome can and peels off the lid. Inside, thick, knotted worms wriggle together. Your in-flight snack. Hungry? Less than an hour earlier, the researcher sits in his office at SCP Foundation Site 3A, eyes excitedly glued to the monitor on his desk. On it, he can see a live video feed being streamed directly from the camera pinned to the collar of D-Class 1442. Through this remote viewing setup, the researcher will be able to view the first man testing of a recently acquired anomaly, one so new that the official file is still actively being written. As a relatively new researcher at the organization, this is his chance to make his mark on Foundation history. The anomaly is a plane, an entire plane retrieved from the Pacific Ocean and brought to a hangar at the site. Like many items recovered by the Foundation, it seems perfectly normal at first glance. In fact, it almost seems too normal. After crashing into the ocean, the aircraft should be visibly damaged, but there's nothing wrong with it. Not so much as a scratch on the exterior. The interior is pristine, and the mechanical parts are all perfectly operational. So the higher-ups approved a series of tests to determine what exactly is so strange about this plane. The best way to do that is to see it in action. Multiple D-Class have been placed inside, scattered in various seats throughout the cabin. In the cockpit, the only agent at Site 3A with a pilot's license, Agent Kulkarni, prepares for takeoff. He sends a quick message to the researcher at the monitor, letting him know that all systems are operational and ready to go. It's time for this mysterious plane to take to the skies, and the researcher has a front row seat. The takeoff goes smoothly, with no notable anomalous activity. At this point, it just feels like watching a first-person simulation of a typical airline experience. Then, as the plane reaches cruising altitude, the intercom crackles to life, and a chipper voice makes an announcement.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your flight with Kingfisher Airlines. I'll be your pilot. Now that we've successfully taken off, make sure to keep your seatbelts unbuckled. Make our jobs a little easier, huh?
The researcher's brow furrows at the sound. That is not Agent Kulkarni's voice. Who is that talking? He sends a message to Agent Kulkarni, but gets no response. Right, of course, he's too busy flying the plane. The researcher jots down a note on his clipboard, recording the first instance of anomalous activity on the plane. Then, he returns his gaze to the monitor. He can see on the video feed that D-1442 has unbuckled their seatbelt in accordance with the announcement's instructions. None of the D-Class appear to react to the announcement, aside from taking off their seatbelts. As D-1442's camera pans down to the floor of the cabin, the researcher begins furiously scribbling notes once more. There's water running through the aisles of the plane, soaking the carpeted floor. The researcher squints, noting dots of green throughout the water. Mold? No. Seaweed. He's certain of it. The water trickles under D-1442's seat, soaking their shoes, and the researcher waits for a reaction. But it never comes. It's as if the D-Class hasn't noticed the apparent seawater spilling into the plane. The camera pans around the plane, and much to the researcher's surprise and frustration, none of the other D-Class are reacting either. He scribbles down some more notes. This must be part of the plane's anomalous nature. Those inside don't notice that anything unusual is happening, even though it is. But why seawater? He underlines the question several times for emphasis, but no answer reveals itself. At least, not yet. He has to admit, it's a bit unsettling to see a plane full of D-Class acting as if they're on a perfectly ordinary trip on a perfectly ordinary plane, as saltwater pools in their shoes, seeping into their socks. Look at the seaweed floating through the waves of water. The researcher can almost smell it, the briny sting of salt in his nose. He wonders what it might mean, and shudders as his imagination runs wild. Perhaps the plane drowns its passengers. Nope, there's no use getting ahead of himself. Better to just wait and see what happens next. It doesn't take long for the next dramatic development to unfold on the monitor. The camera shakes violently as the plane apparently experiences some turbulence. As if reading his mind, D-1442 makes a comment about the turbulence, turning the camera toward the window. Just like the water, D-1442 cannot see anything unusual outside. But on his monitor, sitting in his office, the researcher can see the truth. Even if he doesn't understand what it means yet, there's something caught on the wing of the plane. That much he knows for sure. He squints, leaning forward until his nose is almost touching the screen. What is that? The plane rocks again, and the wing is yanked upward a bit by what he can now see as some kind of wire. He can't see where it ends. It just extends up into the sky until it vanishes from view. And then D-1442 is turning the camera away from the window again, and the researcher can no longer inspect the wire tangled on the wing. The camera is now trained on the aisle again, where two figures are trudging through the sopping wet carpet, wheeling a wobbly cart. As they move down the aisle and closer to the camera, the researcher manages to get a better look at them. A man and a woman, neither of whom look familiar to him, both dressed in matching blue uniforms. On their blazers, they each wear a pin in the shape of a fish and a hook. Atop their heads, blue hats are pinned in place. Though there is nothing immediately off about their appearances, their very presence is of concern to the researcher. There were no flight attendants placed on board. Why would there be? This goes beyond seawater and strange wires on the wings. Now there are brand new humanoids anomalously appearing aboard the plane, wobbling down the aisle with a cart full of drinks. No, not drinks, cans of some kind. As the flight attendants walk, the researcher takes note of their unusual gaits. They move with awkward, arrhythmic plodding steps, like a newborn deer learning to walk for the very first time. For a baby animal, it's endearing.
For two supposedly adult humans who have appeared as if from nowhere, wielding their cart of mysterious cans, it sends a shiver down the researcher's spine. As the female flight attendant approaches D-1442, shiny metal can in hand, the camera captures a glimpse of her face up close. Her eyebrows are drawn on too high, giving her a wide-eyed, shock appearance. No, it isn't just the eyebrows. Her eyes themselves are a bit too wide. Her mouth is stretched in a broad, red lipstick grin, showing just a few too many teeth for the researcher to feel at ease. As she offers the can to D-1442, and they reach out to take it, the researcher notes that the flight attendant does not blink once. She never speaks either. She just holds that unsettling smile and waits for D-1442 to take the can from her hand. Then she moves on to the next passenger. D-1442's camera tilts down toward the can, and they peel back the lid to reveal its contents. As the lens focuses, the researcher's stomach turns at the sight. The can is filled to the brim with writhing, squirming, fat and juicy earthworms. The sort his father used to bring on family fishing trips to bait the hooks with when he was a little boy. D-1442 reaches into the can and pulls out a long, wriggling worm, lifting it toward their face. No, please don't do it. But they can't feel the researcher's revulsion, nor do they seem to even realize they're holding a worm and not a more conventional airplane snack. The camera is mercifully turned away from D-1442's face, so the researcher doesn't have to watch, but he can hear the wet chewing, and he knows exactly what is happening. He covers his mouth, fighting the urge to gag as he watches the rest of the D-Class follow suit, opening their cans and beginning to eat the worms one at a time. With all of the worms passed out, the two flight attendants begin to shamble back up the aisle, pushing the cart through the thick layer of green seaweed that now blankets the floor. There's even more of it than there was a few moments ago, and the researcher can no longer see any of the carpet beneath. The two flight attendants vanish behind the curtain at the front of the plane, leaving the passengers alone with their worms. Nothing else unusual happens for nearly 2 hours, and the researcher sits and watches as every passenger in the camera's line of sight slowly devours each and every worm in their respective can, occasionally idly glancing out the window or flipping through a magazine. The researcher is just beginning to think the anomalous events might be over when the curtain opens once again. The female flight attendant is back. At least, he thinks it must be her. The silhouette looks the same, but it's difficult to be certain. Her face is no longer visible. Instead, it is wrapped in wires that look identical to those spotted on the wing during the supposed turbulence earlier. The wires are draped around her entire body, hanging from her arms, her shoulders, and brushing along the floor next to her shoes. As the flight attendant begins to walk down the aisle in those same eerie plodding steps, she reaches out to a passenger, and the researcher nearly falls out of his chair in shock. Her hands. They aren't hands anymore. They've been replaced with fishing hooks, giant fishing hooks the size of the hands she once had. She walks past D-1442, headed toward the back of the plane. She's out of sight for a few moments until she crosses back into the camera's view. There's a passenger with her, a D-Class with his hands tied together behind his back, wrists bound with something thin and transparent. Again, the researcher remembers those trips with his father. Fishing line. The man is bound with fishing line. He follows the flight attendant with a docile expression, seemingly unconcerned by his state of captivity, the strange wires, and her hook hands. As the flight attendant and the passenger pass the camera, the researcher can see that he was mistaken. She does not just have one passenger with her. She has 5, all with their wrists bound in fishing line, all following her without one word of protest or attempt to resist. The flight attendant and the 5 passengers all vanish through the curtain. D-1442 places the now empty can of worms in the back pocket of the seat in front of them. Then, everything is still again for a while, save for the continuous flow of seawater through the aisles, filling the cabin inch by inch. It is at D-1442's knees now and creeping ever higher. Still, they do not budge. All of a sudden, the plane shakes violently. D-1442's gaze, and the camera with it, snaps toward the window. There, cloud formations rapidly whirl through the air, pouring buckets of water. Lightning flashes, illuminating the darkened sky for a moment. In that moment, brief though it is, the researcher can make out some odd shapes snaking through the air, weaving between the clouds. Another flash of lightning reveals them. Eels.
If his guess is correct, he'd say they are electric eels specifically. D-1442 does not see the eels, but does seem to be affected by the sudden, dramatic change in the weather. They chuckle nervously, voice quavering slightly, and remark that this thunderstorm wasn't predicted on the Weather Channel that morning. The plane shakes again as another flash of lightning breaks through the darkness, revealing more and more eels. The window itself is wobbling, the glass beginning to buckle under the pressure of the water outside, more and more pouring against it. Crash! The glass shatters, and water pours in through the open window, where there should be roaring wind. An eel flies through the window, landing on D-1442's lap. It flops furiously back and forth as D-1442 passively ignores it. The water levels begin to rise rapidly, up and over D-1442's legs, up their chest, until the water is covering the camera lens. Luckily, the camera is outfitted for underwater filming, though the researcher never expected that particular function to be relevant while testing an anomalous airplane. It continues to pick up video, displaying it all on the monitor as it begins to shake violently. The sound of choking can be heard as D-1442 attempts to keep breathing normally, even with water flooding their mouth and lungs. They choke and splutter, slowly drowning without even realizing they're underwater. The camera begins to drift upward, floating away from its place on D-1442. As it hits the ceiling, it swivels and reveals D-1442's unconscious body, floating there below. The rest of the passengers, the ones who didn't leave with the flight attendant earlier, are also drifting through the water, unconscious or worse. Their bodies are covered in green, the seaweed from before growing over them. The researcher is writing furiously now, getting down every detail. When he finishes writing, he grabs his phone. He needs to get back in communication with Agent Kulkarni and figure out an extraction plan before the man drowns, if he hasn't already. The phone rings, but no answer. He should have expected that. It's probably been damaged by the water too. The researcher is just about to contact the site director and ask what to do when the camera picks up motion coming from behind the curtain. Something is emerging from the cockpit. The curtain is shoved to the side, and out bursts Agent Kulkarni. He appears to be breathing steadily despite being underwater. He looks terrified, disoriented, but otherwise unaffected by the chaos unfolding around him. His eyes widen, his eyelids flutter, and he collapses to the ground. His body convulses as if he's having a seizure. He opens his mouth as if to scream, but nothing comes out. Well, at least no sound comes out. Something else does. His jaw opens wider, wider, and wider still, his jaw unhinging like a snake, or an eel, the researcher thinks. There's a glint of metal in the back of his throat, and all at once, a large fishing hook comes rocketing out of his mouth. Another follows it, and another, all connected to fishing line that seems to come from deep in Agent Kulkarni's stomach. Whatever anomalous forces have changed the plane, filled it with water, created eels and flight attendants, have also changed him. The hooks push through the water, moving of their own accord, and attach themselves to the remaining passengers. Some only hook their clothes, others hook deeper, and blood colors the water. Something, and the camera doesn't pick up what, grabs hold of Agent Kulkarni's leg, pulling him back into the darkness beyond the curtain. As he goes, his body pulls the fishing line, dragging the hooks and the passengers with him. One by one, they vanish from view until the plane is empty. The intercom crackles impossibly beneath the water, and the same unrecognizable voice speaks.
"Thank you for flying with Kingfisher."
Silence for a moment, then static. The video feed has been lost. The researcher throws his clipboard against the wall, unable to contain his rage. They lost an entire plane full of D-Class and his valued colleague, and received no concrete answers about the plane. If anything, he has far more questions. One of which is, where is the plane now? A recovery team manages to locate the plane in a surprising place. It lands a few hours later in the same place where it took off. It should be damaged, filled with water, covered in broken windows and gouges from those hooks. But it is just as spotless as it was when they found it. Not a drop of water or speck of seaweed to be seen. No sign of any of its passengers either, or the captain. The only thing on the plane that wasn't there before is the camera, completely dry, sitting in D-1442's seat as if nothing ever happened.
Its locally recorded video confirms the researcher's witness account. Everything he saw seems to be completely real. All planned test flights that were intended to follow this first one are cancelled due to concerns from the Ethics Committee, as well as budgetary concerns regarding the loss of staff. The researcher turns in his notes, his job complete. Then he requests a transfer to another assignment. He's had quite enough of SCP-3531. I can't say I blame him. I was never fond of flying in the first place, but this anomaly has introduced a new level of dread to the experience. SCP-3531 is a Boeing 737 airliner that is unremarkable in every way at first glance. The exterior and interior appear normal, and when not in flight, the plane is completely non-anomalous. When SCP-3531 is in flight, however, that's a different story. Photographs, videos, and audio recordings taken inside of the craft while it is in the air show forms of aquatic-based anomalous phenomena, as well as humanoid figures that manifest and act as flight attendants, despite not being present before the plane takes off. However, in spite of this obviously unusual phenomena, observers are either ignorant of it or unwilling to acknowledge it. Even when presented with video evidence, they will refuse to believe it. Outside witnesses appear to be unaffected, with the ignorance or inability to perceive the anomalies limited to those physically inside of the plane. SCP-3531 was first discovered by the SCP Foundation when Mobile Task Force Lambda-4 birdwatchers conducted a routine inspection of the plane's black box footage. The footage included the following recorded audio.
Look, I'll get you your shipment. We've been held up with processing. Yes, I know how many times I've said it. It's finicky. No, I swear it's just logistics. The clothes are the main problem. We can't get them off mid-flight, so... It's not the attendants, no, they're working fine, but it's hard enough to convince the people that they're on a normal flight. Getting them to, prepare themselves like that would be... No, I'm sorry, it'll be fine. It shouldn't take much longer. The shipment will be...
The voice on the recording was identified as Mrs. Janet Kaminsky, a missing pilot who was presumed dead along with the crew and passengers of the flight. How did they all die? The plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. I can't be certain of what happened, but if I had to guess, I'd say she made that shipment after all. SCP-3531 is stored in the hangar of Site 3A. Tests using SCP-3531 may only be conducted at the discretion of the site director. The details of SCP-3531's nature are somewhat sparse, at least in terms of what is available to someone not assigned to its research team. The best that I can surmise is this. Kingfisher is not a legitimate airline, though I'm sure you've already figured that out. I believe they are a company that services clientele who are interested in fishing, though not for what we might think of as traditional fish. It would seem that humans are loaded onto this anomalous aircraft and kept there, seated and docile, for Kingfisher's clients to capture. Whoever or whatever these clients are, presumably the voices on the other side of Janet Kaminsky's phone call, they are fishing for humans using anomalous means. Who knows how many shipments were made using SCP-3531 before it was seized by the Foundation? The fictitious airline, the plane, the flight attendants, all made for the perfect ruse, and the victims fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Midnight. Person after person disappears into the darkness beyond the rusty metal doors. Their eyes are vacant and glassy. Their movements sluggish and robotic. Men, women, children. After this, they will never be seen again. Their screams will never be heard. There will indeed be screams. I scream, you scream, we all scream. For ice cream.
Fast forward to the next morning as a tow truck driver slides into his cab. Driving a tow truck isn't exactly glamorous, and it frequently involves getting yelled at by angry vehicle owners, but hey, it's a living. That's the thought running through the tow truck driver's mind as he drives to a bank that reported an unauthorized vehicle parked in its employee lot. Probably someone who left it there overnight after overdoing it at a local tavern or something like that. But when he pulls into the lot, he sees a sight that is brand new to him and his several years of towing cars. It's an ice cream truck. An old one, a bit beat up and worse for wear, but an ice cream truck nonetheless. There's a parking boot already attached to one of its wheels, and some strange skid marks on the pavement around the truck.
It looks as if someone tried to drive the truck out of the lot with the boot still on. Well, if someone did try, they failed. The driver hooks the ice cream truck up to his tow truck and makes the trip back to the impound yard. Now it's just a matter of waiting to see if the truck's owner will come to pick it up. But as the days pass and no one turns up, the tow truck drivers begin to wonder if anyone will ever claim it. They place bets with one another, guessing how many more days it'll take, if the owner ever comes at all. After a week, the driver who brought the ice cream truck in decides to take a look inside. No one's bothered to look yet, and his curiosity is beginning to get the best of him. Much to his surprise, the back doors to the truck open right up. The thing's been unlocked the whole time. Inside, he finds several freezers stocked with a variety of surprisingly still frozen offerings. He glances over his shoulder, making sure he's alone. It's against the rules, but it's not like anyone would miss just one ice cream bar, and it's been such a hot day. He grabs one wrapped frozen treat and darts back out of the truck, closing the doors behind him. He doesn't recognize the writing on the brightly colored wrapper. Must be some sort of off-brand ice cream. But when he unwraps it, it looks pretty good. Shiny chocolate coating, wooden stick, it looks like a classic, ordinary ice cream bar. He takes a small experimental bite, and the chocolate cracks beneath his teeth, giving way to sweet vanilla ice cream. It's good. He finishes off the treat quickly, wipes his chocolatey fingers off on his pants, and tosses the wrapper in the trash. A victimless crime. As he tosses the wrapper, he spots the words, "Super Surprise Flavor," printed on the side. Vanilla is hardly a surprising flavor for an ice cream bar, but he shrugs it off as just an unusual marketing choice. He'll never know what he really just ate, and perhaps that's for the best. After all, ignorance is bliss. While the tow truck driver is waiting for someone to claim the ice cream truck and sampling its wares when no one is looking, local police are scrambling to solve a series of missing persons cases. Over the course of the past several days, 4 people have vanished from a nearby trailer park. Each of them disappeared in the middle of the night with no sign of a break-in or any foul play. None of them left a note, none of them had a reason to up and leave in the dead of night. It just doesn't make any sense. With no leads to go on, the police reach out to an organization with a much better track record when it comes to unsolved mysteries, the SCP Foundation. 3 special agents are dispatched to the area, a young man relatively new to fieldwork, an older man who has been with the Foundation for decades, and a middle-aged woman with extensive experience in the field and the research lab alike. They aren't sure what they're looking for, but they'll know it when they find it. Something is making its way through this trailer park, taking people one by one in the dead of night. They just have to figure out what. The Foundation agents interview each member of the community one by one, asking if they saw or heard anything suspicious. One woman reports that she found her daughter standing outside just as the sun was beginning to rise. The little girl had gotten out of her bed and walked over a mile away from her trailer before the mother woke up and realized something was wrong. But when she asked her daughter what she was doing out of bed, the little girl had no memory of ever getting up. It must have been sleepwalking, the mother says. The agents suspect something a bit more sinister, a bit more anomalous might be at play here. But they don't know for certain until they speak to one more potential witness on their list, an elderly deaf man who lost his hearing to an illness over 50 years ago. The police neglected to speak to him, as none of the officers sent to investigate knew sign language. Luckily, the female Foundation agent happens to be fluent in ASL. She conducts an interview with the man, translating his statement for her colleagues. 2 nights ago, the old man tells her, he woke up to lights shining through his window. It was a pair of headlights, shining right into the window by his bed as some sort of vehicle drove by. As his window is not by any sort of main road, he was naturally perplexed and a bit alarmed. He checked his phone and saw that the time was just after 3 a.m. He sat up, peered out the window, and saw that there was a truck parked outside of his trailer. Not just any truck either, but an ice cream truck. A welcome sight on a sunny afternoon, sure, but in the dead of night, seeing it there sent a chill down his spine. But the trepidation he felt at the initial sight was nothing compared to the dread that poured over him as he saw his neighbor walk out of her trailer, eyes wide and glassy like a sleepwalker, and begin to approach the truck. As she did, its back doors opened, as if welcoming her inside. Without so much as a moment of hesitation, the neighbor woman walked into the darkness, and the doors shut tight behind her.
The man jumped out of bed, joints aching from the sudden movement. He pushed through the pain and ran out to the truck, yanking at its back doors. But to no avail. They wouldn't budge. Whatever had caused his neighbor to climb into the mysterious truck, there would be no getting her out. Not without help. So he ran to his other neighbor's trailer and banged on their door as hard as he could. A married couple lived there, nice people, always willing to help a neighbor with a problem. They could do something, surely. The husband answered the door, and just as he opened his mouth to ask what brought the old man here at such an ungodly late hour, he stopped. His eyes took on that same glassy, vacant look, and he began to walk toward the ice cream truck as if in a trance. The old man grabbed at his neighbor's arm, trying to stop him from walking into the truck, but the younger man was stronger than him. He broke free of the older man's grip easily and disappeared into the back of the truck. He ran inside and contacted the police, but no one ever responded. When morning came, the truck was gone, and his neighbors with it. As the old man recounts his story to the female Foundation agent, he becomes more and more distressed. He begs her to track down the truck, to find out what it's doing with the people it steals. Before they go, he tells them one more detail. The truck, as far as he could tell, has no driver. It moves on its own. The agents are puzzled by his account. Not the part about the self-driving ice cream truck supposedly kidnapping people, but something else. It's obvious that this ice cream truck is responsible for the disappearances, but why is it only taking some people and not others? Why did its anomalous effect spare the old man? The only way to find out is to get their hands on the truck. The three agents spend the next day calling around town, looking for any sightings of an ice cream truck where there shouldn't be one. Their hunt leads them to an impound lot and a lactose-intolerant tow truck driver who has been dipping into the ice cream supply when no one is looking. The agents arrive at the impound lot and find the truck sitting there. Could this be it? It matches the description given by the witness. Upon inspecting the inside, they find the freezer stocked with suspiciously cold and fresh-looking ice cream products. All signs point to this being the truck they're looking for. So they pay a few $100s in fines and take the truck with them back to Site 17. The older man and the female agent will drive the ice cream truck, while the younger man will drive the car that they initially made their trip in. Late that night, the team is on the road and only a few hours away from reaching Site 17, when the younger man glances in his rearview mirror and sees that the ice cream truck has veered off course. It is stopped over on the side of the road, and his teammates are climbing out of the driver's and passenger's seats. The younger man is just about to turn off the radio and roll down his window to ask what's going on, when he realizes that something is off about his teammates' expressions. Their eyes are vacant and blank, and they're walking toward the back doors of the truck. It's exactly like the eyewitness described, a trance somehow caused by the truck. He pulls over and reaches for the handle of his door, but freezes. If he gets out, will the trance take him too? What is it that protected the eyewitness, something that affected his neighbors but not him? Suddenly, the realization hits him. The old man was deaf. Ice cream trucks play music. He remembers reading the Odyssey in school, remembers the men on Odysseus's ship becoming entranced by the song of the sirens and jumping to their deaths. That has to be what's happening here. But as he covers his ears with his hands and prepares to run after his teammates, he sees them disappear into the truck and the doors shut behind them. They're gone. Grief washes over him, but he forces the tears to dry. He can mourn later. Right now, it's up to him to stop this thing before it can take anyone else. First, he calls in backup, asking for additional Foundation agents to come help him bring in a potentially deadly anomaly. He also emphasizes that they must all bring ear protection. Whatever they do, they can't let the truck's music reach them. As two vans pull up and backup arrives, the ice cream truck appears to notice that it is surrounded. It revs its engine, attempting to speed off down the road. Thinking quickly, the young man maneuvers his car to block its path. But the truck won't give up that easily. It backs up, picking up speed, and rams into the side of his car. It backs up and rams him again, trying to knock his car out of its path. Two agents, wearing noise-canceling headphones, approach the side doors, trying to enter the truck and take control of the wheel, but it speeds into them and sends them flying. Then, it turns around and veers off down a back road. No way. The young man is not letting this thing escape him. He revs his engine and speeds after the ice cream truck. One of his headlights broke during the truck's assault, and the road is winding and dark, but he squints and focuses all of his energy on tailing it. He cranks up the volume on his car radio, classic rock blaring as he skids around sharp turns in hot pursuit of the renegade truck. The other agents join him, racing down back roads as they all chase down the ice cream truck together. The chase takes nearly 2 hours, 1 hour and 43 minutes to be exact. Then, a few minutes after 5 a.m., the young man catches up to the ice cream truck. It is sitting, dormant, in the middle of the road. Cautiously, he turns down his radio. He cracks the window. No sound but the chirping of the first birds of the morning. Whatever it was doing before, the truck has stopped. For now. The agents lock the wheels of the ice cream truck in place with parking boots and transport it to the Foundation site on the back of a flatbed truck. They searched inside for the lost agents, or at least for their remains, but find nothing inside. Well, not quite nothing. There are the fully stocked freezers crammed full of ice cream. In fact, there seems to be more ice cream in there than the previous time it was inspected. With a sinking feeling, the sole survivor of the field mission realizes what must have happened to his colleagues' bodies. The truck is promptly placed in containment and designated SCP-490. SCP-490 is an ice cream truck that dates to approximately the 1960s. It is mechanically standard as far as the Foundation can tell, with the exception of the audio system. The system, though it is apparently in working order, will not respond to any external input or attempts at operation. The truck's key is always in the ignition and cannot be removed from it by any means. In spite of these unusual aspects, the truck can be driven just like any other truck of its kind and could easily be mistaken for a perfectly ordinary ice cream truck. If left unrestrained, between 2 and 5 a.m. local time, the ice cream truck will start its own engine and drive itself through local roadways on a random circuit at a low speed. During this time, it will function as if it were a brand new vehicle in spite of its obvious wear and tear. Through its attached speakers, it will play a tune that has not yet been identified, though it resembles music played by similar ice cream trucks. Unlike those trucks, which play variations on classics like Pop Goes the Weasel and Teddy Bear Picnic, the music coming from SCP-490 never loops, never repeats, and is just unusual enough to never be identified. It sounds vaguely like a song you might remember from your childhood, but just a bit off somehow. The melody loops and bends in the wrong direction, lending the music a vaguely eerie quality. Or so I've read. I have never heard the music myself. That would be far too dangerous. Any individual who hears the music emitted by SCP-490 will begin to approach the vehicle. Instructions to stop are useless, and they will even fight to break free when physically restrained. Once the person has reached the vehicle, the back doors will open, inviting them to step inside. If they do, the doors will close behind them and become impossible to open via any ordinary means. According to the Foundation's official file on the subject, the doors may be forced open, but the information on what happens next has been expunged. It seems I do not have the security clearance needed to access that particular detail. However, I think I can wager a guess. It's certainly not pretty. If more than one subject is ensnared by the siren song of the ice cream truck, they will line up in an orderly fashion and wait their turn. One by one, they will enter the doors when they open, or will stand there until the 3-hour window of activity is up. If there are affected subjects outside of the vehicle when the time runs out, the spell will be broken, and they will wander away in a daze. Survivors interviewed by the research team had no memory at all of the incident, or of even hearing an ice cream truck in the first place. After 5 a.m., SCP-490 will lose all anomalous abilities, and the doors will be easy to open again. Anyone who entered the truck during its active hours will have disappeared. In their place, the freezers inside will be suddenly restocked with a variety of frozen treats. There are the traditional popsicles and ice cream bars in standard flavors such as chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. However, some of the wrappers read, Super Surprise Flavor. What is that flavor? Well, it's human flesh, as confirmed by DNA testing. And yes, to answer the question you're getting ready to ask, the flesh belongs to the missing people who were lured in by the truck in the first place. I suppose it's truth in advertising. It would certainly be a massive surprise to find human flesh in my ice cream. If you're looking for a dairy-free option from this truck, fret not. I've been told there were also popsicles found in the truck's freezers, containing popsicles made from basic sugars and human blood. For vampires looking for a refreshing summer treat, I suppose. Apologies, sometimes I like to add a bit of levity to the subject at hand. As for containment measures, SCP-490 is currently kept in Foundation Storage Garage 17 Golf. This garage has been heavily soundproofed, and its door has been replaced with a soundproof door, outfitted with an interior code lock. SCP-490 must have all 4 wheels disabled with standard parking boots, and be kept chained to 4 molybdenum eye bolts at all times. The eye bolts are sunk into a solid concrete floor at a minimum depth of 3 meters. I prefer to keep my private life and my work separate, focusing on my research rather than personal anecdotes. However, while reading about SCP-490, I found a strange, half-forgotten memory of my childhood beginning to stir, floating up to the surface. I was quite young, no older than 8 if I recall correctly. It was a warm summer night, and I was fast asleep, when all of a sudden, I heard the soft lilt of a melody, a gentle, tinkling sound like a music box. I looked at the clock on my wall, and the hour was late, far too late for an ice cream truck to be outside. But the next thing I knew, I was standing in the yard in front of a streetlight, barefoot and still wearing my pajamas. My mother was gripping my shoulders, her eyes wide and wild with fear. She said that I had tried to leave the house in the dead of night to run after an ice cream truck. I had screamed and fought when she held me back from the strange vehicle, but thankfully she was far stronger than I. She was able to keep me from walking into the back of the truck. I can't be certain what exactly happened, how much of this memory is true, or how much was the scrambled recollection of a frightened child. But I do remember that my mother always slept with earplugs in to block out my father's deafening snoring. She would not have been able to hear the music, the same music that lured me out of my bed and out into the night. If she hadn't been wearing those earplugs, if she hadn't stopped me. Well, I'd rather not think any more about that. Should you ever hear strange music in the dead of night, like an ice cream truck driving by at an impossible hour, pull your pillow over your head and try your best to block it out until morning. Otherwise, you might become the next super surprise flavor. The crate arrived on a gray morning, its wood damp from the mist that clung to the streets. No note, no address. The old shopkeeper dragged it inside, muttering curses under his breath. Business had been slow, the candy shop hanging by a thread. Maybe this was some promotional miracle, or a mistake. The crate groaned as it opened, nails straining against the wood. Inside sat a vending machine, like nothing he'd ever seen. Mechanical and polished to a gleam, it had a presence that felt wrong. The glass dome at the top revealed rows of perfectly round candies, their colors so vibrant they seemed to glow. He tilted the machine slightly, spotting words engraved on the underside. "Try something different today, sweet and candy red." He snorted and shook his head. "Who writes this stuff?" Still, desperate times. He dusted off a corner near the front window and set the machine there. Its coin slot caught the light, winking at him like it knew something he didn't. The old man stared at it for a moment before fishing a coin from his pocket. One little test couldn't hurt. The coin clinked as it slid in. He pulled the lever, and the machine whirred mechanically, spitting out a single candy into the tray below. It was perfect, round, red, and faintly glistening. He rolled it in his palm before popping it into his mouth. The flavor hit him like a revelation. Sweetness bloomed on his tongue, bright and irresistible. It was like every childhood memory condensed into one perfect bite. For a moment, he forgot the world, forgot the bills, forgot the empty streets outside. Then, it turned. The sweetness soured, twisting into something sharp and metallic. His tongue burned, his throat tightening as if a fist had gripped it. His vision blurred, the shop tilting wildly around him. A pressure built in his chest, and his heart thudded like it was trying to escape. The whispers came next, soft at first, then getting louder. They skittered around his mind. His hands trembled, and he clawed at his shirt as though it might stop the suffocating weight pressing down on him. Then came the blood. At first, he dismissed the dampness under his arms, thinking it was sweat from the panic gripping him. But when he pulled his trembling hand away from his shirt, it was slick and red. His heart stopped, or at least it felt like it, as he looked down. Crimson stains seeped through his sleeves, pooling in the folds of his armpits. The sticky wetness spread to his toes, soaking his socks and dripping onto the wooden floor. "No," he whispered, his voice shaky. No, no, no. The old man stumbled toward the mirror behind the counter, catching his reflection. Bloodshot eyes stared back at him, veins bulging and red tears streaming down his face. A faint trail of red trickled from his nose, dripping onto the counter. The sight twisted his stomach, and he nearly collapsed as the whispers in his head grew louder. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He tried to wipe the blood away, but it only smeared, leaving crimson streaks on his pale skin. His trembling legs gave out, and he fell behind the counter, the whispers rising to a deafening roar in his ears. He stumbled backward, crashing into the shelves behind the counter. Glass jars rattled and fell, the sound barely registering. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air as the whispers rose to a crescendo. Cold sweat dripped down his back, pooling around him as his body shook uncontrollably. The machine stood silent, its polished surface reflecting the shopkeeper's pale, horrified face. Hours passed before the shopkeeper stirred. He sat up slowly, his breath shallow and uneven. Every inch of him screamed with exhaustion, his heart racing as though it might burst. His throat was raw, and every breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. The blood had dried, crusting over his skin and clothes. The whispers had faded, but they still echoed faintly in the corners of his mind. He staggered to his feet, gripping the counter for support. His eyes darted to the candy machine in the corner, its polished surface gleaming in the dim light. The lever glinted, innocent and inviting, as if mocking him. A sudden surge of anger jolted him into action. He grabbed a large garbage bag from behind the counter, the crinkle of the plastic loud in the stillness of the shop. With trembling hands, he approached the machine. His fingers hesitated on the glass dome containing the candies, but the whispers that had haunted him surged in his mind, spurring him forward. He yanked the dome off with a sharp pull, the glass cool and unnervingly smooth under his fingers. It felt heavier than he'd expected, or maybe that was just the weight of the fear gnawing at him. One by one, the gumballs tumbled into the bag, their faintly shimmering surfaces catching the light as they fell in an almost hypnotic cascade. The shopkeeper tightened the bag with a savage twist, tying it shut with a knot that his shaking hands barely managed. He marched to the alley behind the shop, each step driven by a mixture of determination and dread. The garbage bin stood there, rusting and leaning slightly to one side, its lid askew. He threw the bag inside with more force than necessary, the gumballs rattling against the metal like sinister marbles. Slamming the lid shut, he lingered for a moment, his breath coming in uneven gasps. The whispers in his mind seemed fainter now, but they weren't gone. Back inside the shop, his gaze drifted back to the machine. A wrench sat on the counter nearby, and for a moment, the temptation to destroy the machine entirely burned hot in his chest. He grabbed the wrench, its weight familiar and reassuring in his grip. But then he stopped. His knuckles turned white as he stared at the machine, its presence almost daring him to make the first move. What if destroying it made things worse? What if the whispers came back stronger, angrier? The shopkeeper set the wrench down, his hands shaking. "Not yet," he whispered to himself, backing away. The machine remained, gleaming silently, patient as ever. He scrubbed at his arms, smearing dried blood into his sleeves. He could still feel the whispers slithering through his thoughts. Panic started to grip at him. That night, he bolted the shop door and hid in the back room, far from the machine's gleaming temptation. But the next morning, when he mustered the courage to unlock the shop and face the world, his heart sank. The machine was full again, its candy stock replenished as though nothing had happened. The polished surface seemed brighter, its engraving, "Try something different today, sweet and candy red," catching the light with unnerving cheer. The shopkeeper backed away. He swore he heard faint whispers as he fled to the back room. The shopkeeper's mind unraveled day by day. He barely left the back room, haunted by panic attacks and phantom voices. His wife found him pacing, muttering under his breath, or staring blankly at the wall. "You're scaring the customers," she snapped, shoving an order book into his hands. "Stay here if you're going to be useless." She dismissed his warnings as nonsense. Overwork, she told herself. A man his age running a shop without help was bound to take a toll. To her, the machine was a blessing. Customers were curious,
drawn to its sleek design and the novelty of its candies. Sales were up, and she had no intention of getting rid of it. One sunny afternoon, a young boy walked into the shop with his mother. He barely noticed the jars of licorice or the rows of sugar sticks. His attention locked onto the vending machine. His small hands clenched his mother's skirt, his voice rising in excitement. "I want that one," he said, pointing at the machine. His mother frowned. "You have plenty of candy at home." "But I don't have that one," the boy whined, tugging harder. His voice grew louder with every protest, drawing glances from other customers. The mother sighed, digging into her purse for a coin. "Fine," she said, her tone weary. She dropped the coin into his eager palm. "But you're not eating it until after dinner, understand?" The boy nodded, already bounding toward the machine. The coin clinked into the slot, and he pulled the lever with all his might. A single candy dropped into the dispenser. He plucked it out, holding it up like a prize. The candy shimmered faintly, its surface glossy and vibrant, almost too perfect. "Thank you, Mommy," he chirped, clutching it tightly as they left the shop. The shopkeeper's wife watched them go, shaking her head. "Kids and their sweets," she muttered, turning back to the counter. She didn't notice the faint hum that lingered in the air, nor the way the machine's lever reset itself, ready for the next customer. That evening, the boy bolted through his dinner, his fork clattering against the plate as he devoured the meal with all the grace of a starved animal. "Can I have it now?" he asked, mouth still half full. His mother sighed, exchanging a glance with his father before nodding. "Go ahead," she said, "but brush your teeth after." The boy didn't wait for further permission. He sprinted to his room, slamming the door behind him. Perched on his bed, he pulled the candy from his pocket. The wrapper crinkled as he took it off, the sound sharp and electric in the quiet room. He held the candy up, turning it in his fingers, marveling at the faint shimmer. With a triumphant grin, he popped it into his mouth. The sweetness hit him like a tidal wave, a syrupy explosion of flavor that made his eyes water. He murmured, savoring it. But then, it changed. The sweetness soured, turning sharp and metallic. A bitterness clawed at the back of his throat, and his stomach churned. Suddenly, a jolt of pain shot through him like an electric shock. His fingers twitched uncontrollably, dropping the candy wrapper onto the floor. Then, the whispers began. They were faint at first, a low murmur brushing the edges of his consciousness, but they grew louder, insistent, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. His hands shot to his ears, trying to block out the noise, but it was inside his head, crawling under his skin. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice high and cracked. "Make it stop!" The shadows in his room seemed to move. His toy cars, neatly lined up on the shelf, rattled as if an unseen hand had brushed against them. His favorite stuffed bear toppled from the bed, its button eyes glinting eerily in the dim light. He scrambled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but there was nowhere to go. Blood pooled under his arms, seeping through his shirt and leaving dark stains on his pajama sleeves. The tips of his socks grew red and damp, sticky with a crimson sheen that spread to the carpet. A sharp sting burned at the corner of his eyes. He wiped at them, but his hand came away smeared with red. "Mom!" he shrieked, but the words were barely coherent. He doubled over, his stomach twisting. Blood dripped from his nose, splattering onto the candy wrapper as his body convulsed. His skin glistened with sweat, streaked with faint trails of crimson. The door burst open, and his parents rushed in. His mother froze in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God!" she gasped. His father darted forward, grabbing the boy's trembling shoulders. "What's happening to him?" he yelled, his voice rising with panic. The boy clawed at his father's arms, his wide eyes darting around the room, as though he were seeing something they couldn't. "It's here!" he choked out, his voice raw. "It's here!" The candy wrapper lay discarded on the floor, the faint, sweet smell lingering in the air. The mother picked it up with trembling fingers, staring at it as if it held the answer. But the glossy paper offered no clues, only the lingering promise of something sweet and candy red. The boy's cries echoed through the neighborhood that night, his parents' shouts barely masking the chaos. By morning, everyone had heard the story, or some version of it. Whispers swirled in the corners of the diner and at the general store. "Did you hear about that boy?" someone would ask, leaning in as if the details might vanish if spoken too loudly. Blood everywhere, they say. And the candy from that machine, another neighbor would add, hushed but eager. The candy shop itself seemed to hold its breath. Fewer parents dared to enter, casting wary glances at the vending machine through the window. But their children, wide-eyed and curious, couldn't resist pressing their noses to the glass. It didn't take long for the machine to claim another child. This time, it was a shy girl with pigtails, her cheeks flushed as she clutched a few coins in her tiny hand. She'd saved every penny of her allowance, eyeing the forbidden candy with growing curiosity each time she passed the shop. Today, her chance had come. Her mother lingered in the bookstore next door, engrossed in a discussion about the latest novel. The girl seized the moment, slipping into the shop as quietly as a shadow. The shopkeeper's wife sat at the counter, poring over a stack of receipts. She barely looked up as the girl approached the vending machine. The girl hesitated, her heart pounding as she slid the coin into the slot. The lever felt cold in her small hand. She pulled it, her breath catching as the candy tumbled into the dispenser. She picked it up, gazing at its shimmering surface. For a moment, she thought she heard a faint hum, but she brushed it off and darted out of the shop, her prize clutched tightly. That night, her parents found her curled under her bed. Her hands and feet were crusted with dried blood, the metallic smell filling the room. At first, they thought she'd hurt herself, but a frantic inspection revealed no injuries, just the grotesque patterns of her own sweat pooling and drying in thick, crimson streaks.
Sweetheart,
her mother whispered, kneeling to meet her daughter's hollow stare.
what happened?
The girl didn't answer. Her lips moved, but the words were nonsense. Broken phrases and murmurs that made no sense. Tears streamed from her bloodshot eyes, staining her cheeks red. Her parents exchanged terrified glances, their child trembling and unresponsive in their arms. The town's unease deepened when the next incident followed just days later. A boy, known for his boldness and love of adventure, used his pocket money to buy the candy. He was last seen stuffing it into his mouth as he walked toward the woods, a wide grin on his face. Hours passed before his family found him, barefoot and wandering aimlessly through the trees. His clothes were torn, his skin streaked with dirt and blood. His face was pale, his expression blank.
Son, what happened to you?
His father asked, gripping the boy's shoulders, his voice shaking. The boy blinked, his eyes unfocused. His lips quivered as he whispered,
I don't know.
His father's grip tightened.
What do you mean you don't know? Where have you been?
The boy looked down at his hands, coated in blood. He held them up, trembling.
Who am I?
He asked softly. His parents stepped back in horror. The boy didn't seem to recognize them, or himself. There were no injuries, no explanation for the blood, only silence, broken by the boy's ragged breathing and his mother's sobs. The shop became a cursed place. Parents yanked their children away from the windows, their warnings growing sharper.
Stay away from there. Do you hear me?
A chorus of "Yes, ma'am" and "Yes, sir" followed, but the children's eyes still darted toward the machine, their curiosity gnawing at them. The shopkeeper's wife was no fool. She noticed the dwindling foot traffic and the fearful glances.
It's just a machine,
she muttered one evening, sweeping the floor. But that's when the shopkeeper's wife remembered something strange. No matter how many candies the machine dispensed, by morning, its glass dome was full again. At first, she chalked it up to a trick of the mind. Perhaps she hadn't been paying attention. But that same night, after locking up, she emptied the dome herself, pouring every last gumball into a tin bucket. She carried the bucket to the back room, stuffing it into a cupboard and locking the door for good measure. The next morning, the dome was full again. She froze, staring at the machine as a chill crept up her spine. The polished surface seemed to shimmer under the dim shop lights, the coin slot almost beckoning at her. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, but she pulled back at the last second.
Just my imagination,
she whispered, trying to steady her breath, but deep down, she knew better. That night, she left the shop lights on. Meanwhile, the rumors reached further than the town, carried by concerned whispers and unsettling reports. Parents spoke of children drenched in blood that wasn't theirs, of panic attacks and hallucinations. The stories of missing children and bizarre deaths eventually caught the attention of the SCP Foundation. One crisp morning, 2 men in dark suits entered the shop. Their voices were calm, their questions pointed. They introduced themselves as government officials conducting a safety inspection.
We've heard reports of strange occurrences linked to this machine,
one said, his eyes fixed on the vending contraption. The shopkeeper's wife hesitated.
It's just a candy machine,
she said weakly, but her voice faltered. The whispers had kept her awake for nights, and the memory of the refilled dome haunted her. The men exchanged a glance.
We'd like to take it for further examination,
the other said,
for public safety.
Relief and dread warred within her.
Take it,
she said quickly, almost too eagerly. The Foundation agents moved with precision. A containment team arrived within the hour, disassembling the machine piece by piece. Despite its mechanical simplicity, the process was far from ordinary. The polished exterior resisted their tools, the lever locked stubbornly in place until they used specialized equipment to disable it. As the machine was packed into a reinforced crate, one agent held up the base, revealing the inscription. "Try something different today, sweet and candy red." The phrase dripped with irony, given the chaos it had caused. The shopkeeper and his wife were escorted into a back room. Their memories of the machine, the candy, and the horrors it had unleashed were erased with a simple injection. They would wake the next morning with only a faint sense of something missing. The machine was transported to a secure Foundation site, its mysteries far from solved. Researchers marveled at its infinite supply of candy, its indestructible mechanisms, and the faint hum it emitted in the quiet of the observation chamber.
Where did it come from?
One researcher mused aloud, staring at the refilled dome. No one answered. The machine sat silent, its polished surface reflecting the sterile lights of the containment room. For now, it was contained. But as the whispers began to creep through the facility's halls, one thing became clear. This anomaly, now formally designated SCP-942, was far from finished. The machine, now officially labeled SCP-942-2, was wheeled into a reinforced chamber under the watchful eyes of armed guards and nervous researchers. It sat in the center of the brightly lit room, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. For weeks it remained still, silent, and yet undeniably ominous. Researchers set up constant surveillance. Cameras captured every angle of the machine, but it offered no answers. The dome refilled itself each night with the same crimson-tinted candies. There was no observable mechanism, no hidden compartment. The candies simply appeared. One researcher stared at the monitor, their voice tinged with unease.
It's like it's taunting us.
Another shrugged, trying to mask their own nerves.
Or just showing off.
The candies, now designated SCP-942-1, were subjected to rigorous analysis. Their composition seemed ordinary at first. Sugar, artificial flavoring, food dye, but their effects on living subjects told a much darker story. D-Class personnel were brought in for testing. Each was handed a single candy, instructed to consume it, and monitored closely. The first subject popped it into their mouth, chewing slowly. At first, their expression brightened.
Tastes amazing,
they murmured, a faint smile tugging at their lips. But within moments, their demeanor shifted. Their hands trembled, their breathing quickened. They clutched their head, muttering incoherently. Then, the screaming began.
"Get them out!"
The researcher barked, but it was too late. The subject collapsed, convulsing violently before falling into unconsciousness. The pattern was clear. SCP-942-1 wasn't just candy. It was a weapon, disguised as a treat. Despite strict protocols, curiosity proved to be a dangerous weakness. During a routine experiment, one researcher, fatigued and frustrated, decided to taste SCP-942-1 themselves. Whether it was a lapse in judgment or an act of defiance, the result was the same. The moment they bit into the candy, their eyes widened. At first, they seemed fine. Then they weren't. Their breathing turned erratic. They clawed at their arms, leaving deep red streaks as they screamed about shadows moving in the corners of the room. They stumbled into equipment, their voice rising in hysteria.
They're watching! They're everywhere!
They shrieked before collapsing onto the floor, twitching and muttering incoherently. The incident left the observation team shaken.
That's why we have protocols,
the lead researcher said coldly, though their voice betrayed a hint of fear. The researcher was sedated and taken for observation. Their prognosis was grim. Weeks turned into months, but the Foundation's brightest minds were no closer to understanding SCP-942-2. The machine's ability to replenish candy remained a mystery. It defied every attempt to probe its inner workings. X-rays showed nothing unusual. Attempts to dismantle it were met with failure, as tools shattered against its metal frame. SCP-942-2 remains contained in its reinforced chamber, monitored day and night. The candies are carefully cataloged, each piece treated as a potential threat. Researchers continue their experiments, but the anomaly remains an enigma. For now, SCP-942-2 sits silently, its polished surface reflecting the sterile glow of the lab. The candies inside gleam invitingly, their crimson hues promising sweetness and something far more sinister. Whatever its purpose, one thing is certain. This machine, with its endless supply of SCP-942-1, is determined to make dentists and therapists rich.